The Delta Quadrant was never quiet. Even in the calm stretches of empty space, there was a sense of tension, a weight in the vacuum that followed the USS Voyager like a persistent shadow. Captain Catherine Janeway had become accustomed to that feeling over the years, navigating through hostile territories, anomalies that defied physics, and the unpredictable consequences of being nearly 70,000 light years from home. But this morning, if one could even call it a morning in the starless vastness outside, there was something different humming beneath the hull. A tremor, subtle and elongated, like reality itself was whispering that something was coming. Something not of this quadrant. Something not of this universe. Janeway stood at the center of the bridge with her hands clasped behind her back. She had long ago perfected that posture of alert calmness, a stance that let her crew know she had everything under control, even if the universe was doing its best to prove otherwise. Tuvok stood to her left, as stoic as ever, his dark eyes scanning scrolling lines of Vulcan-scripted analysis across the tactical console. Harry Kim monitored the sensor readouts, eyebrows knitting tighter with each passing second. Tom Paris hovered over navigation like a man expecting turbulence. And on the far side of the bridge, Chakotay watched it all with a quiet intensity that Janeway had come to rely on. If anyone sensed things before they happened, it was Chakotay. The hum deepened, a low vibration, the kind Voyager sometimes made when approaching gravimetric distortions. Janeway looked toward Harry. "You're seeing it too, aren't you, Ensign?" she asked with her eyes. Harry swallowed. "Captain, sensors are registering an incoming spatial rift, but not like anything we've seen before. It's phasing in and out of measurable existence. A spatial rift. Wonderful," Janeway muttered under her breath. "Because we certainly haven't had enough of those lately." Tuvok's fingers danced across the tactical grid. "It appears to be a quantum-level disruption. However, its energetic signature is unfamiliar. It is not Borg, nor Voth, nor Vidayan. It does not correlate to any known Delta Quadrant technology." Janeway straightened. "Put it on screen." The view screen shifted from the star field to a swirling, unstable mass of blue-gold light. It crackled, stretched, compressed, then expanded again like an enormous lens-twisting reality. The structure resembled a tear in the fabric of existence, shimmering with electrical arcs that danced like lightning made of liquid metal. Tom exhaled. "Looks like the universe is having a bad day." Janeway didn't disagree. "Any life signs? Anything at all on sensors?" Harry hesitated. "Not exactly life signs. More like something metallic, something artificial. And it's being pulled through the rift like it's caught in a gravitational spool." Before Janeway could respond, the rift flared. A searing burst of white light flooded the bridge, forcing everyone to turn away. Then a silhouette emerged, humanoid, armored, falling through the collapsing distortion like a meteor punched through space. The object streaked forward, shimmering red and gold as it tumbled end over end through zero gravity. It wasn't a probe or drone. It wasn't a ship. It was a suit, a man inside a suit, and he was falling fast. Harry shouted, "It's headed straight for us!" "Shields up!" Janeway barked. Tuvok raised them immediately. The armored figure slammed against Voyager's shields, bounced, spiraled, and drifted in a slow arc toward open space. The armor glowed faintly, a circular light pulsing at its chest like a beating heart. Through the helmet visor, Janeway could make out a human form slumped forward. "Is he alive?" she asked. "Uncertain," Tuvok replied. "But his suit appears to be powered by an internal reactor of unknown design. Its energy output is substantial." Chakotay turned to Janeway. "If that thing destabilizes, we don't know what it could do." Janeway nodded. "Beam him directly to sickbay. Now." The transporter fired. The armored man vanished in a cascade of golden particles. Sickbay materialized around him with a thud as the armored body hit the floor. The doctor flickered into existence moments later, his expression a perfect blend of irritation and fascination. Another unexpected guest from a catastrophic dimensional anomaly. "How refreshing," he said dryly. He approached the armored man and adjusted his medical scans. "Intriguing. The suit appears to be using a miniaturized fusion system as an energy source. Highly advanced, highly dangerous, and yet quite elegant." The armored figure twitched. The doctor stepped back quickly. "He's regaining consciousness." A metallic groan escaped the suit as repulsor servos shifted. The figure pushed itself upright. The helmet's faceplate hissed and folded open. And Tony Stark stared at the holographic doctor with the expression of a man who had just woken up from a hangover, only to find himself in a new universe. "Okay," Tony muttered. "Either I'm dead, hallucinating, or Comic-Con got way too immersive this year." The doctor blinked. "Comic-Con? You know, costumes, nerds, lines that stretch into forever." Tony waved dismissively. "Look, hologram guy, no offense, but did someone slip LSD into my coffee? Or am I actually talking to a floating medical screensaver?" "I am not a screensaver," the doctor snapped. "I am the emergency medical hologram aboard the USS Voyager." Tony paused. "Huh. Okay. Not the weirdest thing I've seen. Still top 10, though." Janeway entered with Chakotay close behind. Tony turned to them, his HUD scanning automatically. The readouts flickered with confusion. Alien biosigns, unknown starship classification, unknown quantum coordinates. He lifted a hand as if to wave. "Hi, Tony Stark. Genius, billionaire, man who probably needs a nap. Mind explaining where exactly I am? Because from the look of that wildly unhelpful rift, I'm guessing Kansas is off the table." Janeway stepped forward. "You're aboard the starship Voyager, Mr. Stark, and you came through some kind of interdimensional rupture. Can you tell us what happened?" Tony rubbed the back of his neck. "Last thing I remember, I was testing a new energy tunneling system. Think dimensional GPS meets angry microwave oven. Then boom, giant space rip. I get tossed around like a pinball, and now I'm talking to a doctor made of light." The doctor folded his arms. "Your sarcasm is noted." Tony smirked. "Trust me, Doc, that was barely sarcasm. I've got levels." Chakotay spoke gently. "You're far from home, Tony. Really far." Tony focused. "How far?" Janeway exchanged a glance with Chakotay. "Try 70,000 light years from Earth, and in another quadrant entirely." Tony's face went blank. "So I didn't just break the universe. I speed ran losing it entirely." "Great, just great," Janeway continued. "What exactly is that device in your chest?" Tuvok's scans flagged it as a power generator of considerable output. Tony placed a hand over the arc reactor. "This? It's a long story involving shrapnel, terrorists, and a glow stick of death. But functionally, it's my heart. Don't worry, it's stable. Most of the time," the doctor muttered. "Comforting." Tony ignored him. "Okay, so, you're a Federation starship lost in space. I'm a walking power plant with rockets. Maybe we help each other out. You get me home. I don't explode on your carpet." Janeway smiled faintly. "We don't have carpets," but agreed. For now. Tony looked around, suddenly weary. All right, Captain, but before I help anyone, I need a diagnostics bay, a power station, and at least 1 cup of coffee, or the future equivalent. I'm flexible. Janeway simply said, "You'll fit in fine." Voyager continued gliding through the void, unaware that the rift Tony came through had not fully closed, that something else was watching from the other side, and that the moment Iron Man entered the Delta Quadrant, its delicate balance had shifted. The universe had felt it, and it was about to respond. Tony Stark sat on a bio-bed in sickbay while the doctor ran a medical tricorder over him, as if scanning an exotic animal that had wandered in from a distant planet. Tony watched the hologram's expression with casual amusement. The doctor's face shifted between intrigue, disbelief, and mild annoyance, and Tony found himself smirking more with each passing second. "You appear human," the doctor finally announced, "though your cellular reading suggests slight radiation exposure and faint energy signatures consistent with the power source in your chest." Tony laughed. "Hologram, you just described 90% of my baseline. Radiation, weird energy, mysterious glowing chest thing. Welcome to a day ending in Y." The doctor continued his examination with professional detachment. "Fascinating. Your arc reactor produces enough output to rival several of our ship's auxiliary systems, and yet it is lodged inside your thoracic cavity. Primitive design choices aside, it is rather elegant." Tony tilted his head. "You know, for a walking hollow projector, you give decent compliments, though calling my work primitive is a low blow. I'm from the 21st century. We had Wi-Fi and coffee machines that talk back." The doctor snapped the tricorder shut. "Yes, well, we have replicators. They make coffee without an attitude." Tony winced. "If you show me a machine that tries to give me decaf against my will, I will rip its programming out." Janeway stepped into sickbay, Chakotay trailing behind her. She wore that diplomatic yet piercing look that suggested she was evaluating Tony from 10 different angles at once. Tony recognized leadership when he saw it. Her posture reminded him of Pepper's when she was running 5 continents worth of operations. "How is our visitor?" Janeway asked. The doctor gave a curt nod, irritating but stable. Tony grinned. "See? That's practically a love letter." Janeway turned to Tony. "We've routed you access to one of our auxiliary engineering bays. You'll be able to run diagnostics on your suit there. But before you go tinkering with anything, I need to understand what you're capable of, and what your presence here means for my crew." Tony hopped off the bio-bed with surprising agility, considering he had just survived a trip through dimensional chaos. "What I'm capable of? Well, I'm Iron Man. I build things, break things, save the world. Ideally in that order, but the sequence tends to get messy." Chakotay folded his arms. "What about weapons?" Tony shrugged. "I've got the usual. Repulsors, unibeam, micro-missiles, some party tricks. Nothing you can't handle if your doors are warp-rated." Janeway raised an eyebrow. "Your suit could cause significant damage if mishandled." Tony leaned in slightly, tone softening. "Captain, I'm not here to wreck your ship. I don't even know how I ended up here. Trust me, my to-do list for today did not include quantum travel, or talking to a hologram who thinks he's better than me." The doctor interjected. "I am better than you," Tony smirked. "Your projection software with attitude subroutines." Chakotay cut in before the banter escalated. "Captain, Sensors are still picking up residual quantum distortions where we found him. It's not stable. Whatever brought him here isn't finished. Janeway nodded. Then we need to understand it quickly. Mr. Stark, can your armor help us analyze the rift? Tony sighed. Probably, but I need tools, power, and a stable diagnostic environment. And maybe a sandwich. Janeway smiled. Neelix will be happy to feed you. Tony blinked. Who? Before Janeway could answer, the door slid open and Voyager's self-appointed morale officer and culinary enthusiast bounded in with a plate of something vaguely food-shaped and thoroughly alarming. Welcome to Voyager, the Talaxian beamed. I heard we Beers had a new guest. I prepared a welcoming treat. It has flavors from 5 planets and textures from 9 ecosystems. Tony recoiled as if Neelix had offered him a live grenade. Wow, that is vibrant. Are those tentacles? Neelix laughed. Those are flavor appendages. They help the sauce breathe. Tony stared. The sauce breathes? Neelix brightened. Only on good days. Tony looked at Janeway as if pleading for mercy. Captain, you rescued me. I owe you. But please do not make me eat alien tentacle lasagna. Janeway chuckled. You'll get used to it. The doctor deadpanned. Or die trying. Tony politely pushed the plate aside. Thanks, big guy. Really, maybe later. Much later. As in when I'm unconscious. Neelix shrugged happily. More for me, Tony whispered to Janeway. You people eat that voluntarily? Janeway replied. Sometimes. Standards fluctuate in the Delta Quadrant. Tony let out a breath and changed the subject. All right, Captain. Lead the way. Let's see what your engineering bay can do. The trek through Voyager was an experience and cultural shock for Tony. Sleek metal corridors, smooth lighting, minimalist design. No visible wires, no clutter, no industrial grit. It felt clean in a way Stark Tech never quite managed. Too clean, like stepping into a laboratory that doubled as a temple. Crew members glanced at Tony with curiosity, some with awe, a few with caution. The armor was unmistakably alien to them. Red and gold plating gleaming under Voyager's internal lights, the arc reactor pulsing like a heartbeat. Tony walked with the relaxed confidence of someone who had faced gods, armies, and existential threats before breakfast. Chakotay watched him carefully. Your armor, does it respond to your neurological signals? Tony nodded. Partially. I've got gesture control, voice command, neural link, plus an AI assistant who doesn't judge me. Much. Chakotay gave a slight smile. You'll find we're quite used to unusual technology. We have a former Borg drone on board. Tony stopped mid-step. Excuse me? Janeway answered. 7 of 9. You'll meet her soon enough. Tony blinked twice. You have a Borg crew member. Janeway gave a crisp nod. Ex-Borg. Tony threw his hands up. Was that detail going to drop casually? You kept that quiet. Next thing you'll tell me is you have a hologram who thinks he's a doctor. Chakotay grinned slightly. Funny thing about that. They reached engineering. The warp core pulsed majestically, filling the room with a deep, resonant hum that Tony felt in his bones. B'Elanna Torres turned from her console and froze when she saw him. Catherine, what in Grethor is that? Tony pointed at himself proudly. This is Iron Man. You're welcome. B'Elanna's eyes scanned the armor. Klingon instinct and engineering curiosity clashed visibly on her face. That thing is radiating power levels that should not exist, Tony replied. That's what they all say before they ask for help. B'Elanna folded her arms. Let me guess. You think you can improve my warp core? Tony grinned. You want me to? B'Elanna held his gaze for a long moment, The corners of her mouth twitched upward. "Maybe, if you don't blow us all up first." Janeway nodded toward an auxiliary bay. Tony moved to the workstation and began interfacing the suit with Voyager's systems. The holographic displays flickered as Tony's suit synced. B'Elanna leaned in. "What are you doing?" Tony muttered, getting a look at the cosmic train wreck that threw me across time and space. If I can analyze the energy residues still clinging to my suit, I might reverse engineer what happened, or at least figure out if it's coming back. Janeway stiffened. "If?" Tony sighed. "Captain, with dimensional rifts, it's either the universe's worst coincidence or it's intentional. I'm hoping for coincidence. But knowing my life, something's probably gunning for me." Chakotay frowned. "A threat from your universe?" Tony didn't answer immediately. His eyes narrowed as readings scrolled across the display. Energy wavelengths oscillated irregularly, interference patterns resembling overlapping universes. A faint signature he didn't want to believe. Tony whispered, "That's impossible." Janeway stepped closer. "What is it?" Tony inhaled. "That rift. It's not just a tier. It's a doorway, and it's not closed." The warp core dimmed momentarily, as if in response. Voyager's lights flickered. A tremor rippled through the deck plates. B'Elanna shouted, "What was that?" Tuvok's voice came through the comm. "Captain, sensors are detecting a secondary rupture forming off our port bow." Janeway turned sharply toward the exit. "Bridge, now!" Tony sealed his faceplate. "Stark," Chakotay called out. "Are you coming?" Tony rocketed upward slightly, repulsors humming. "Oh, I'm not missing this." They reached the bridge as Tom Paris struggled to keep Voyager steady. The view screen displayed another swirling rift, smaller but growing rapidly, its edges crackling with violent red-white energy. Harry shouted, "Captain, something is emerging." Janeway braced herself. Tony hovered just behind her, armor humming like a storm contained in metal. Then the rift opened wider. A metallic object forced its way through. Tony's heart dropped, because he knew that silhouette. Sleek, predatory, and absolutely the last thing the Delta Quadrant needed. Tony whispered through his helmet, "Captain, that's Stark tech." Janeway froze. "Explain." Tony's voice hardened. "That's one of my drones, but it's not responding. If it came through the rift, something else might too." The drone's single eye ignited a burning scarlet, and it raised its weapon. Janeway shouted, "Red alert!" The drone fired. Voyager lurched violently, and Tony Stark knew something else, with his technology's signature, was still waiting on the other side of that rift. Something far worse. The bridge erupted into motion as the rogue Stark drone fired again, a searing bolt of crimson energy streaking across the void and smashing into Voyager's shields. The deck shook violently, consoles sparking, alarms blaring their shrill warnings. Janeway held onto the railing beside her chair as she shouted for damage reports, while Tony hovered in midair, his helmet analyzing the drone with ruthless speed. Paris called out through gritted teeth, "Shields down to 84%. That thing hits harder than a Kazan Raider." Tony grimaced. "That's because it's not using standard weapons. That's an enhanced repulsor. Stark tech on steroids. And I didn't build it." Janeway's eyes snapped toward him. "Then who did?" Tony didn't answer immediately, because even he wasn't sure he liked where his thoughts were heading, but he pushed it aside. Later. Right now, the drone's single red eye pulsed again as it targeted Voyager's hull with chilling precision. Tuvok reported calmly, "It is charging another shot. Janeway gestured sharply. Paris, evasive maneuvers. Tony cut in. No, hold position for 3 seconds. Janeway turned her head just enough to meet his gaze through his mask. And why should I do that? Tony lifted his hand, palm glowing brighter. Because I can intercept it. Trust me. Janeway held his gaze for a beat that seemed to stretch across entire star systems, weighing him, judging him, testing whether he was reckless or capable. In the end, she made her decision with the speed of a seasoned commander who understood when boldness mattered. Paris, hold position. Aye, Captain. The drone fired. Tony shot forward instantly, a streak of gold and red light slicing through the space before the blast reached Voyager. He thrust his hands outward, repulsors blasting at full force as the crimson beam slammed into his palms. The impact rocked him. The beam carved arcs of plasma around his armor, the suit groaning as energy levels spiked beyond safe limits. Tony grunted, teeth clenched. The suit's vibrational dampeners shuddered. Heat bled across his arms. "Stark!" Janeway shouted. "Your armor won't withstand another hit like that!" Tony growled through his comms. "Yeah, well, neither will your ship, so let's multitask." He shifted the energy sideways, letting the blast shear harmlessly into open space. Repulsor plates hummed angrily as Tony forced the energy away. The drone recalibrated instantly, its eye glowing hotter. Harry reported with panic rising in his voice. "Captain, it's adapting to Stark's deflection. It's going to target him directly." Tony hovered in front of the drone, raising his hands again. "Oh, so now you want to play?" The drone fired a rapid succession of smaller pulses, sharp and needle precise. Tony ducked, swerved, spun. Repulsors flared as he danced through the barrage like he'd trained for this exact moment. Tuvok announced its behavior clinically. It is attempting to analyze his evasive pattern. Tony scoffed. "Good luck, buddy. Even I don't know my evasive pattern." Janeway stepped forward. "Can you disable it without destroying it?" Tony scoffed again. "You scientists and your optimism. Captain, that thing is corrupted, rogue, possessed, built by a Stark who hates his life choices. And I don't know what else is coming through the rift." The drone surged forward, faster than before, as if reacting to Tony's words. It closed the distance in seconds and charged another full power shot at point-blank range. Tony whispered, "Nope." He fired the unibeam from his chest, a blinding lance of blue-white energy that slammed into the drone and hurled it backward like a toy. The drone spiraled and stabilized, its eye flickering, its targeting system locking onto Tony with cold precision. Janeway barked, "Mr. Paris, back us away from the rift. Harry, scan for any additional contacts." Tony soared after the drone, weaving around its movements. The two machines clashed in a storm of light and thunder as Tony unleashed a flurry of micro-repulsor bursts that peppered the drone's hull. The drone retaliated with a plasma-based blade that formed along its arm, sweeping it at Tony with impossible speed. He barely managed to dodge, the blade grazing his armor and leaving a molten scar along the gold plating. "Okay," Tony snapped. "That is definitely illegal and unfair." He fired a pair of homing repulsors that detonated against the drone's arm, sending pieces of plating flying into the void. The drone countered by launching two small spheres from its back. They expanded into crackling red nets of energy. Harry yelled from the bridge, "Captain, those are Stark entanglement webs. They're designed to immobilize targets." Janeway turned toward him. "You sound like you've seen them before." Harry blinked. I've seen schematics in Starfleet tactical databases from a briefing about dimensional anomalies. There are files describing technology from other universes. Some match Mr. Stark's designs. Tony overheard through the open channel and snapped. Wait, my tech showed up here before me? Janeway answered him sharply. Focus on the fight. Tony grumbled. Fine, but we are revisiting that later. The entanglement web streaked toward him, crackling with deadly radiance. Tony blasted upward, spiraled, and shot behind the drone. The webs arced, tracking his movements. Tony muttered, "Why do all my inventions hate me?" He spun in a tight corkscrew, letting the webs collide. They detonated harmlessly. Tony seized the moment. He rocketed toward the drone, grabbed its arm, twisted, and ripped out a power conduit. The drone jolted violently as sparks exploded from its joints. Voyager shuddered again. Tuvok reported, "Captain, a larger object is emerging from the rift." Tony froze mid-maneuver. The drone took advantage, slamming an elbow into his side. Tony grunted, but retaliated by kicking the drone back. Janeway said calmly, but urgently, "Mr. Stark, whatever is coming through is significantly larger than the drone." Tony turned and stared into the growing rift. Metal, engines, a familiar silhouette, but larger than any drone he'd ever built. It was a full-sized assault suit, unmanned, brutal, weaponized to hell. Something he had designed years ago but abandoned because it crossed every ethical line he'd set for himself. He whispered, "No, no, no, no. That's the Titan Mark 0, a prototype I scrapped." "It wasn't supposed to exist," Paris whispered from the bridge. "That thing is huge," Harry gasped. "Its energy signature is off the charts." Tony muttered, "That is an autonomous war machine designed to take down entire fleets. It's meant to fight gods, not starships." Janeway's voice hardened. "And why exactly do you have weapons meant to fight gods?" Tony snapped. "Because I lived in a world where aliens kept dropping out of the sky, that's why." Chakotay cut in. "Captain, the Titan is powering weapons," Tuvok added. "It is locked onto Voyager." Tony streaked toward the Titan instantly. "Captain, get your ship out of the line of fire. I'll hold it off," Janeway shouted. "You'll be destroyed." Tony fired boosters at maximum output. "Not before I break that thing's jaw, if it has one." The Titan's chest opened. Inside was a swirling sphere of unstable energy. Tony cursed. "Damn it, that's a quantum destabilizer. If that fires, it won't just damage Voyager. It'll tear a hole through half this sector." Janeway's voice cut through the comm, controlled and iron steady. "Tom, evasive pattern Omega-5. Tuvok, prepare countermeasures." Tony rocketed toward the Titan. The drone followed him like a loyal hound obeying a master's will. Tony blasted behind the Titan, firing multiple unibeams into the drone to force it back. He shouted, "Captain, you need to get distance." That destabilizer could rupture space itself. Janeway fired back. "We can't outrun a reality-collapsing weapon, Mr. Stark." "We stand with you," Tony growled. "Touching, dangerous, very Voyager of you." He slammed both repulsors into the Titan's chest, trying to destabilize the destabilizer. The Titan barely budged. It turned its head toward him, blank metal reflecting the violent energy dancing inside its core. Tony felt the suit straining. Power dropped. His HUD flickered. He muttered, "Okay, new plan. I need to overload its core manually." Janeway finally snapped. "That will kill you." Tony fired another blast. "Won't be the first time someone tried to kill me. I get better." Chakotay broke in. "Stark, listen. If the Titan is a machine from your universe, it must have weaknesses, you know. You designed it." Tony paused only half a second. "Yeah, I designed it, but I built it to be unbeatable. That was the mistake. That was the lesson. I built something that couldn't be stopped," Tuvok said calmly. "Then you must." Tony exhaled. "Fine, but there's only one way. I need access to its mainframe. I need a direct link." Janeway turned. "Harry, can we beam him?" "Inside?" Harry shook his head. "Too much interference. The destabilizer is flooding the area with quantum noise." Tony grit his teeth. "Figures. I have to do this the hard way." He rocketed up the Titan's back, dodging red-hot plasma bolts it fired blindly behind itself. The drone returned for another strike, but Tony grabbed it mid-flight, spun, and hurled it into the rift like discarded scrap. The Titan raised an arm and fired a chain of energy blasts that lit up space like lightning. Tony zigzagged between them, every maneuver faster and tighter than the last. His heart pounded. His HUD flashed warnings, oxygen levels dipping, armor integrity compromised. He muttered, "Just another Stark stunt. Easy." He shot upward, landed on the Titan's shoulders, and slammed both fists into the back of its neck. Metal dented. Circuits sparked. The Titan roared with a low mechanical hum as it tried to shake him off. Tony hung on tightly, grunted, and tore off an entire panel. Beneath it were cables, glowing nodes, and a central processor interface humming with malevolent energy. Tony reached into the exposed machinery and grabbed a thick cable pulsing with power. The moment he touched it, the Titan jerked violently, as if recognizing him. Tony whispered, "I'm sorry, I should never have built you." Then he ripped the cable out. The Titan spasmed, its core flickering. The destabilizer surged wildly. Harry shouted, "Captain, its core is destabilizing further. It will explode." Janeway turned to Tuvok. "Options," Tuvok answered. "None that spare, Mr. Stark." Tony could hear the exchange. He sighed. "Story of my life." He pulled another cable loose. The Titan howled, energy surging. He tore out a third. The destabilizer dimmed. Tony sagged in relief. One more, just one more. He reached for the final cable. Then the rift behind him pulsed. A new shape emerged, human, armored, with a face he knew far too well. A voice echoed across space, cold and mocking. "Tony, did you really think you could escape me?" Tony froze. Janeway whispered, "Who is that?" And Tony Stark felt dread colder than space itself as he answered softly, "That's me." Tony stared into the void as the armored figure drifted free of the rift, illuminated by the chaotic red-white energy behind him. The figure was shaped like a man, armored like a god, and radiating a presence that made every instinct Tony had scream warnings. The armor was sleeker than Tony's, more angular, coated in dark metallic plates with glowing crimson lines that pulsed like veins. It reminded Tony of his own designs twisted through a mirror of malice. The visor glowed with red light. A cold voice came through amplified speakers. "Hello, Tony. Long time no see." Janeway's breath caught. "That looks like your armor, but different. Who is that?" Tony's pulse hammered as the figure floated silently closer. "That's not someone. That's something. A version of me that took every worst impulse I ever had and ran with it." The armored figure spread its hands as if greeting an old friend. "Come now, don't spoil the moment. After all, you created me." Harry stammered. "Captain, I'm detecting an extreme energy signature originating from the new arrival. It's almost identical to Stark's suit, but amplified," Tuvok analyzed calmly. His armor appears heavily militarized. It contains weaponry far beyond even the Titan prototype. Tony whispered darkly, "That's because that monster doesn't do limits." The other Tony tilted his head. "Monster is such a dramatic word. I prefer inevitability." Janeway stepped forward, voice strong. "Identify yourself. You are in Federation space. State your intentions." The figure laughed, a harsh metallic sound that echoed unnaturally. "Captain Catherine Janeway, I've studied your record. You leave quite a wake behind you. Hero of the Delta Quadrant, champion of lost causes, admirably stubborn. Unfortunately, your ship stands between me and my objective." Janeway narrowed her eyes. "And that objective is?" The armored figure raised a hand. "Tony Stark," Tony growled. "Oh, great." Again with the obsession. The figure pointed. "I've crossed 3 realities to find you, Tony. You didn't think you could run forever, did you?" Janeway cut sharply across the audio. "Whatever conflict exists between you and Mr. Stark does not justify threatening this vessel. Stand down, or we will respond accordingly." The figure didn't even look at her. "Your Federation fascinates me. You operate with ideals instead of fear, cooperation instead of control. It's adorable, naive, and utterly doomed." Tony snapped. "You want me? Fine, here I am. Leave them out of it." The figure's visor brightened. "Oh, Tony, you still think this is about you. You still think you're the center of the universe. How small your mind can be. No, this is about what you represent. A variable, a threat, a reminder of a life I left behind." Tony glared. "And what life is that?" The figure opened his arms, letting energy ripple through the armor. "A life where I stopped pretending to be a hero." Janeway stood firm. "You're not taking him." The figure chuckled. "Try and stop me." The Titan Mark Zero responded instantly to his presence. The damaged war machine jerked violently back to life, its light stabilizing under new command. Its destabilizer flared like a miniature star, recharging at an impossible rate. Harry shouted, "Captain, the Titan is powering up again. The energy spike is 10 times stronger than before," Tuvok added. "The new arrival appears to be remotely overriding the damaged systems." Tony cursed. "He's using command codes. My codes," Janeway barked. "Paris, get us out of its firing arc. Maximum thrust." Paris worked the controls desperately. "Captain, its targeting is auto-adjusted. It's tracking us faster than we can move." The Titan locked onto Voyager again. The new figure drifted closer, almost lazily. "Tony, your presence here jeopardizes my work across countless dimensions. I can't allow that. You're the one variable I cannot predict, so I'm removing you." Tony positioned himself between Voyager and the Titan. "You want to kill me? Fine, but leave them out of it. They have nothing to do with us." The visor glowed darker. "Everything has to do with us. You made me. Your choices made me. And now the consequences have come calling." Tony fired his repulsors and launched himself directly at the armored figure. The two collided with a thunderous shockwave that rippled across the void. Voyager trembled. Sparks flew from the Titan. The rift behind them howled louder. Tony swung his fist toward the figure's helmet. The hit bounced off harmlessly. The figure retaliated with a brutal downward strike to Tony's chest. The blow sent Tony spiraling backward, alarms blaring across his HUD. "Stark!" Chakotay shouted. "You need support!" Tony snarled. "Stay back! He'll kill you all without blinking!" The figure drifted closer, arms at his sides. "You're rusty, Tony. Sloppy, sentimental. Do you really think you can win?" Tony blasted forward again, firing everything he had. Repulsors, micro-rockets, unibeam, explosions of blue and gold light filled space as Tony unleashed an onslaught that should have carved asteroids in half. The armored figure simply raised one hand. A crimson shield of energy materialized, absorbing every blast, every missile, every escape attempt Tony made. When the smoke cleared, the figure hadn't moved an inch. He spoke calmly. Your technology was always elegant, but your mind was always your greatest weakness. You refused to go far enough. Tony growled. You call killing everyone around you going far enough? The figure's voice sharpened. I call it surviving. Suddenly, the figure shot forward with speed that outmatched Tony's by orders of magnitude. His fist crashed into Tony's jaw, sending him plummeting downward. The impact rattled Tony's teeth. His vision blurred. His suit whined in protest. Tony regained control just in time to see the figure slam into him again, faster than thought. Pain lanced down Tony's side. His HUD flashed red. Paris shouted, "Captain, Tony's losing!" Janeway's voice sharpened to a blade. Tuvok, target the hostile suit. Full spread, phasers and torpedoes. Tuvok executed commands without delay. Phasers lanced outward in golden beams. Photons streaked like miniature stars. The armored figure didn't dodge. He caught the photon torpedo with one hand, crushed it. The explosion lit the void in a blinding flash. Voyager rocked violently from the blast shock. Tuvok reported, "No effect." Janeway clenched her fist. Damn it. Tony wiped blood from his lip inside the helmet. Okay, so he's stronger, faster, smarter, better armor. Great, fantastic. Love that for me. The figure appeared behind him. You always relied on brute ingenuity, Tony, but you never understood perfection. Tony turned and grabbed him around the neck. Oh, I understand perfection. I rejected it. He fired point blank into the figure's helmet. A desperate blast, raw and uncalibrated. It stunned the figure for half a second, but only half a second. The armored figure seized Tony by the throat plate and squeezed. Tony's airflow cut sharply. His suit gasped warnings, heart rate rising, oxygen dropping. The figure whispered, "Goodbye, Tony Stark." Suddenly, a sharp barrage of phaser fire struck the figure's back. Not enough to wound him, but enough to interrupt him. Voyager had repositioned, firing concentrated bursts at the armored intruder. Janeway shouted over comms, "Get away from him!" The figure turned his head slowly toward Voyager. That was unwise. He raised his palm, energy gathered. But before he fired, another voice broke across the comm channel. A calm, female voice. Clear, focused, unyielding. Enough. Janeway spun toward the source. Seven of 9 stepped onto the bridge, her eyes fixed on the view screen. Her expression betrayed no fear, only analysis. This vessel poses a tactical threat to Voyager. Its enhancements resemble Stark's technology, but modified. I recommend immediate interference. Janeway asked, "What can you do?" Seven spoke with absolute certainty. Adapt. Her fingers flashed across a console, rerouting Borg algorithms through Voyager's deflector dish. Tony heard her through the comms. "Seven, don't..." But the blast was already firing. A radius of green-tinted disruption energy surged outward, hitting both Tony and the armored figure. The figure jerked violently mid-air, sparks erupting from multiple points of his armor. The disruption field tangled with his systems, overloaded his stabilizers, forced him back several meters. Tony gasped. "Thank you. Seriously, thank you." Seven answered coolly. "I was not speaking to you." Tony squinted. "Yeah, that tracks." The armored figure recovered with unnatural speed. He rotated his neck as if testing a bruise. Interesting. Borg adaptation algorithms. Inefficient, but irritating. Seven stared at him. "You will stand down." The figure regarded her almost curiously. "You were Borg once, a drone. Efficient, silent, controlled. You should understand me better than any of them," Seven replied. "I understand you perfectly. You believe control is strength. You are mistaken." The figure spoke softly. "No, you are." The Titan behind him suddenly roared with renewed energy, its destabilizer fully charged. Tony's HUD screamed alerts. "He's going to fire, and if he does, the blast will wipe us all out," Janeway shouted. "Paris, get us clear!" Paris fought the helm. "I'm trying, but the destabilizer is generating gravity shear. We're stuck in its pull." The figure charged energy in both hands, preparing to finish Tony and Voyager simultaneously. Tony whispered to himself, "Come on, think. Then it hit him. Not brute force, not firepower, not speed, but the one thing this twisted version of himself would never expect. Tony opened a private channel to the bridge. "Captain, can you amplify a signal through the main deflector?" "Something simple," Janeway responded instantly. "What kind of signal?" Tony inhaled. "A frequency, a specific one, a Stark override. My Stark override. For every suit I ever built." Seven processed instantly. "You intend to trigger a failsafe?" Tony answered. "Yeah, something he doesn't know I kept. A final command hard-coded into every system I designed before I got smart enough to remove it." Seven nodded slowly. "I understand." Janeway looked between them. "Do it. Now." Seven initiated the deflector pulse. Energy surged through Voyager. The blast radiated outward in a cone of pure signal. It struck the Titan first. The war machine froze, lights dimming, systems collapsing. The destabilizer flickered. Then it hit the armored figure. He seized up violently, armor spasming, lights flashing out of sync. For a moment, Tony saw panic in the red visor. "What did you do?" Tony floated in front of him, battered but defiant. "Override code, 00 Alpha, shut down Stark protocol. You really should have seen that coming. You're supposed to be me." The figure snarled through gridded electronic distortion. "You think this will stop me?" Tony shook his head. "No, but it'll slow you down." The corrupted Stark suit spasmed again. Energy shut down across his limbs. The Titan collapsed completely. The rift behind them pulsed wildly, destabilizing without the Titan's core to anchor it. Janeway yelled, "Everyone, brace for temporal backlash!" Space twisted, time distorted. The rift exploded outward in a wave of pure distortion. The armored figure was hurled backward, dragged toward the collapsing anomaly. He struggled, clawing against the pull. Tony reached out instinctively, even knowing he shouldn't. Tony shouted, "Let go! You'll tear yourself apart!" The figure roared, "I will find you again! I will cross every dimension if I must!" His visor burned one final crimson glare. Then he was sucked into the rift, and the anomaly collapsed in a blazing flash that shook the stars. Silence followed. Voyager drifted, battered, but alive. Tony floated in the debris field, breathing heavily, armor scorched, systems failing. Janeway's voice came through softly. "Tony, are you all right?" Tony laughed weakly. "Define all right," Seven answered coolly. "He is functional, barely." Tony smiled under the helmet. "Thanks, Seven. Always comforting." Voyager's tractor beam reached out, pulling Tony gently toward the ship. Janeway spoke again, relief slipping into her tone. "Let's get you home, Mr. Stark," Tony whispered. "I hope we can." But in the back of his mind, he knew the truth. The other him was still out there, and he wasn't done. Tony Stark stared into the void as the figure stepped fully through the rift, armored in a suit that mirrored his own aesthetic, but twisted, angular, predatory. Matte black, plating with crimson lines, pulsing beneath the surface like veins carrying toxic electricity. The faceplate was sleek, expressionless, and reflective enough that for a heartbeat, Tony saw his own stunned expression staring back at him. Then the visor of the new suit lit up with two burning red slits. Janeway's voice drifted through the comm system, tight with alarm. "Mr. Stark, who is that?" Tony's chest tightened as dread clawed its way up his spine. His voice came out flat and low. "That's me. Or rather, that's a version of me. A version who made every wrong decision I could have made. A version who decided the world needed ruling instead of saving." Chakotay demanded. "You're telling us that's an alternate dimensional version of you?" Tony replied bitterly. "That's exactly what I'm telling you." The dark armored figure floated closer, moving with eerie precision. The voice that echoed through the void sounded like Tony's, but colder, hollow, as if stripped of humor and wrapped in steel. "You always were predictable, Tony, trying to stop the inevitable, trying to be the hero. It's pathetic when you think about it," Tony fired back instinctively. "If I wanted a pep talk from myself, I'd go to therapy. Who the hell invited you to the Delta Quadrant?" The alternate Tony, whom the HUD identified as the Mark Omega armor, tilted its head. "You ran, Tony. You ran, and you thought you could hide in another universe. But I always finish my work. I always finish my wars." Tony snarled. "I didn't run. I got tossed here like cosmic trash. And newsflash, I don't do wars anymore. Been there, done that, bought the trauma." Omega. Tony ignored him, turning toward Voyager. "Interesting. A Starfleet vessel. Humans who've discovered discipline, order, unity. They could be useful." Janeway stepped forward instinctively, as if facing a god she refused to kneel before. "Useful is not a word I enjoy hearing from an armored invader." Omega Tony's voice was calm. "I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to retrieve what is mine. You." Tony gestured at his chest. "Nah, hard pass. I'm nobody's property, least of all my evil doppelganger." Omega Tony raised a hand. The Titan Mark Zero behind Tony, still flickering and damaged, suddenly powered back up with a jolt. Tony swore. That thing was dead. Omega Tony spoke again. "Everything you create belongs to me, Tony. Even versions of you in other universes. Even you." Tony cursed loudly and charged. He shot forward, repulsors screaming, and slammed into the Omega suit. The impact echoed through the void like a thunderclap. They tumbled backward, trading rapid-fire blows that lit the darkness with bursts of red and blue light. Tony shouted through the comms, "Captain, stay out of this. This guy's armed with tech that makes mine look like garage prototypes." Omega Tony countered with a crackling blade of pure plasma extending from his wrist. He swung, and Tony barely rolled aside, the blade carving a glowing line through the void. "You never learned," the Omega version taunted. "You never understood what true power looks like. You never understood what humanity needs." Tony barked a laugh, even as he dodged another lethal swipe. "Oh, I understood. They need a lot of things. Therapy, snacks, better financial planning, not a fascist megalomaniac in iron pajamas." Omega Tony grabbed him by the throat and hurled him downward. Tony's propulsion system screamed as he stabilized himself meters above Voyager's hull. Paris yelled, "Captain, they're coming too close. We need to reposition." Janeway clenched her jaw. Yes. Tom, reverse thrust. Keep us clear. As Voyager drifted away, Omega Tony raised a single hand. A beam of energy erupted toward the ship. Tony intercepted it, pushing against the blast with both repulsors, straining as the energy roared around him. Tony grunted, sweating inside the suit. Captain, get more distance. This guy's playing with universe-breaking toys. Janeway's voice remained steady, but he could hear the tension woven through every syllable. We're increasing distance, but the rift is destabilizing. If it expands further, we risk losing structural integrity. Omega Tony stopped the beam abruptly, leaving Tony gasping for breath. You always did rely on brute improv. That's your flaw. You never planned far enough ahead. You never saw the bigger picture, Tony fired back. Because the bigger picture always had dudes like you trying to paint over it. Omega. Tony suddenly vanished. Tony's sensors screamed alarms. He spun around desperately. Where did he go? Tuvok answered from the bridge. He has reappeared on the far side of the rift. Tony looked up just as Omega Tony raised both hands toward the Titan Mark 0. No. The Titan surged with fresh power, its chest core blazing like an unstable star. Omega Tony spoke coldly. Titan, execute primary directive. Neutralize Tony Stark. The Titan roared with mechanical fury and charged, massive limbs tearing through the void. Tony blasted away, firing repulsors, micro-missiles, and anything he could bring online. The Titan shrugged off the attacks as if they were sparks from a campfire. Tony spat. This is ridiculous. Why did I ever program these things so damn tough? Omega Tony responded. Because deep down, even you knew you were not strong enough. You needed something stronger to ensure your legacy. Tony muttered bitterly. Yeah, well, my legacy can sue me for damages. The Titan slammed into him with the force of a meteor. Tony's shields flickered violently. Pain rippled through his ribs as his suit compensated. He spun away, breathing heavily. Captain, if you have any bright ideas, now is a good time. Actually, it was a good time 10 minutes ago, Harry Kim shouted from the bridge. Captain, the Titan's energy output is exceeding known tolerances. If it detonates, the shockwave will tear open the rift even wider. Janeway replied sharply. We need to seal the rift. What are our options? Tuvok answered in his calm Vulcan tone. We may be able to generate a graviton inversion pulse using the main deflector. It could tighten the quantum aperture enough to collapse the rift, Chakotay added grimly. But that might trap Mr. Stark's counterpart in our universe, Tony interjected. Trap him where? In a place where he wants to build an empire? Not my favorite outcome. But closing the rift is priority 1. Do it, Janeway responded firmly. Not yet. We need to get you out of there first. Tony dodged as the Titan slammed another massive fist down where he'd been seconds earlier. My escape plan is currently trying to kill me. Do it anyway. Omega Tony suddenly reappeared beside the Titan, hovering calmly as if observing a science experiment. He raised his hand again. Tony barely had time to swear. Oh, come on. What now? Omega. Tony spoke with terrifying finality. Omega Protocol. Initiate. The Titan glowed brighter, circuitry across its hull lighting up like a network of molten veins. The destabilizer within its chest began spinning faster, energy output climbing exponentially. Harry called out in fear, Captain, it's overloading. If that thing detonates now, we won't be able to collapse the rift in time, Tony whispered. He's turning it into a bomb, a universe breaker. Omega. Tony's voice was cold. This multiverse is flawed, full of chaos, full of Tonys who make the wrong choices. I will erase the broken ones and build a new order." Tony roared back. "Okay, seriously? Who hurt you? Other than me, apparently. And you. And life. But therapy? Ever heard of it?" "Omega." Tony ignored him. "Titan. Execute." The Titan lunged toward Voyager. Tony screamed, "No!" He rocketed forward, slamming full force into the Titan's chest, grappling onto the destabilizer core. He shoved his arm deep into the machinery, sparks tearing across his armor. Janeway yelled, "Mr. Stark, what are you doing?" Tony grinned through the pain. "Improvising. My specialty. Omega." Tony charged, streaking forward like a missile, shouting, "You cannot stop what I created, Tony." Tony yelled back, "Watch me." He ripped open the destabilizer core, electricity arcing across his armor in violent bursts. The Titan convulsed. Omega Tony raised a hand to stop him, but Tony plunged deeper into the core. His HUD screamed warnings, systems overloading, energy feedback critical, suit integrity failing. Tony whispered fiercely, "Come on, come on, come on." The destabilizer sputtered, then shut down. The Titan collapsed, all lights dying. Omega Tony stopped mid-flight, stunned. Impossible. Tony hovered above the dying machine, panting. Nothing is impossible when I'm really annoyed. But then the rift pulsed violently, reacting to the destabilizer's sudden shutdown like a wound reopening. It grew, stretching wider, cracks of raw space gnashing like cosmic jaws. Harry shouted, "Captain, the rift is destabilizing violently." Janeway called out, "Tuvok, begin graviton inversion. Sequence." Omega Tony's voice echoed, full of fury. "This is not finished." Tony aimed a repulsor at him. "Bring it on." Omega Tony surged forward, and the two versions of Tony Stark collided again in a blinding explosion of energy, and Voyager began the countdown towards sealing the rift. The silence between the two Iron Men didn't feel like silence at all. It felt like pressure, like the vacuum of space had been replaced by a crushing weight that settled on every sensor, every heartbeat, every breath across the bridge. Voyager's crew watched the view screen with a collective tension so sharp it could have sliced through the hull. Even Janeway's voice, always steady, seemed to soften as if she recognized the danger instinctively. Tony hovered in place, armor flickering with the leftover strain of tearing through the Titan systems. He stared at the new arrival, the armored figure emerging from the rift like a nightmare wearing his face. The suit was familiar, too familiar, but it wasn't one he had built in any timeline he wanted to acknowledge. Its surface gleamed a darker red, almost blood-like, with deep black plating along the joints and a faceplate shaped into a sharper, more predatory angle. The eyes glowed not with sleek blue or cool white, but with a sinister crimson, as if the armor itself resented the light around it. Tony could hear his own heart beating inside the suit. The other Tony floated effortlessly, hands behind his back in a posture that looked relaxed, almost regal, but the menace beneath it radiated like radiation from a dying star. Finally, Tony found his voice. "How did you get here?" The other Tony tilted his head. "Same way you did. Someone opened a door, someone clever, someone angry, someone who got tired of waiting for you to step up." Tony felt a muscle twitch along his jaw. "Don't. Just don't. If you think you're me, you should know how much I hate melodramatic villain speeches." The other, Tony laughed softly. "Oh, it's not melodramatic. It's functional. Some worlds need a villain, Tony, and some villains need a universe." Janeway stepped forward. "Identify yourself." The armored figure turned toward Voyager's view screen, voice dripping with amusement. "Captain Catherine Janeway. I've studied you, efficient, determined, willing to bend the rules to keep your crew alive. Admirable, really. But this isn't your fight." Janeway's voice sharpened. "Anything threatening my ship is my fight." Dark Tony laughed. "Of course, always the hero, no matter the galaxy. Shame you picked the wrong one," Tony cut in before Janeway could answer. "Why are you here?" The dark armored figure raised one hand, fingers flexing in slow, deliberate motions. "To correct a mistake." Tony clenched his fist. "And what mistake would that be?" "You. Existing." That was all the warning Tony got before Dark Tony's armor ignited in a violent burst of crimson light, and he lunged forward with blinding speed. Tony barely managed to react before the other. Him crashed into him with a shock wave that rippled through space. Voyager shook from the sheer force of the impact, Paris gripping the helm to keep the ship steady. Tony grunted as he was hurled backward toward the debris of the Titan Mark Zero, repulsors struggling to stabilize. Dark Tony followed instantly, blasting forward in a red streak that tore across open space. Tony spun, blasting a repulsor beam at his counterpart. Dark Tony twisted effortlessly, the beam passing by him like a gentle breeze. The villain's voice echoed through Tony's comm, still relying on standard repulsor signatures. "Predictable. You haven't grown at all," Tony growled. "Oh yeah? Watch this." He fired a volley of micro-missiles that arced through space in a twisting dance, targeting Dark Tony from multiple angles. For a heartbeat, it looked like Tony might land a clean strike. But Dark Tony simply raised his hand and emitted a pulse of energy that detonated every missile mid-flight, creating a sphere of expanding fire around him. He floated through the explosion untouched, as if strolling through a garden. Tony muttered, "Of course you have a countermeasure for my countermeasures. I really hate being predictable." Dark Tony's voice came cold and sharp. "I know everything you know. I improved everything you built, and I eliminated everything that made you weak." Tony fired upward, darting away to gain distance, but Dark Tony stayed right behind him, closing the gap like a predator chasing a wounded animal. Janeway shouted, "Tuvok, prepare to break up the engagement." Tuvok analyzed rapidly. "Captain, any attempt to intervene could escalate the conflict. Their weapons appear to be technologically compatible. If we intercept, we risk becoming collateral." Janeway's eyes hardened. "Then we need a different angle." Back outside, Tony dodged another crimson blast, the beam grazing his armor and ripping a molten line across his shoulder. Sparks burst from the wound, and Tony hissed through gritted teeth. Dark Tony's voice echoed calmly. "I see you still haven't updated your heat shielding. Pathetic." Tony fired back with a surge of thruster power, slamming into Dark Tony and sending both of them spinning. The shockwave rippled through space like thunder. They grappled in midair, repulsors flaring as the two suits wrestled in a deadly ballet. Tony snarled, "If you're me, then you know I don't go down easy." Dark Tony answered, "And I don't let myself be weak." He drove his fist into Tony's chestplate with enough force to rattle every bolt Stark had installed. Tony flew backward, spinning through the void before stabilizing. His HUD flickered as damage alarms screamed. Tony muttered, "Yep, punching myself still hurts. Good to know." Dark Tony raised his palms, repulsors glowing in a vicious crimson pattern Tony didn't recognize. Something new, something dangerous. Tony whispered. Oh, hell. Back on the bridge, Harry's eyes widened. Captain, the energy signature he's charging could pierce our shields entirely. Janeway snapped. Paris, get us behind the asteroid cluster. Move now. Voyager veered sharply left, the hull creaking from the strain. The tactical display lit up as the ship darted behind a series of massive, jagged asteroids that floated like ancient monuments. Tuvok confirmed, We are out of their direct line of fire, Chakotay added. But Tony is not. Outside, Dark Tony fired. A spear of blood-red energy streaked through space toward Tony with terrifying precision. Tony raised both hands and unleashed every joule of repulsor output he had left. The beams collided mid-space, forming a swirling vortex of red and gold light that crackled like a storm trapped inside a glass sphere. The vortex exploded. Tony's armor was hurled back like a ragdoll, alarms blaring inside the suit. His breathing hitched as power levels plummeted. Dark Tony hovered calmly above him, watching like a judge waiting for a verdict. Tony groaned. Okay, that's new and painful, mostly painful. Dark Tony lowered himself slowly, speaking with a tone dripping in disdain. You are a relic. You're still fighting like the man who crawled out of a cave. Weak, compassionate, tethered to people. That's why you never win. Tony forced himself upright, armor sparking. Maybe, but at least when I look in the mirror, I don't see a sociopathic toaster oven. Dark Tony's visor flashed crimson. You joke, always joking. That's why in my universe I had to fix everything. I had to end everything. I had to burn down the old world to make something better. Tony froze. What do you mean end? Dark Tony paused, as if savoring the moment. My world is gone, Tony, because I destroyed it. Tony's chest tightened. He stared, unable to process the words. You... what? Dark Tony spread his arms. I wiped the slate clean. Removed wars, removed poverty, removed chaos, removed choice. And when the world resisted, I removed them too. Tony felt cold. You killed them? You killed everyone? Dark Tony's voice softened, almost tender. Not everyone, just the ones who wouldn't listen. Tony's voice cracked. You're insane, Dark Tony tilted his head. No, I'm efficient, something you never were. Tony charged forward, repulsors blazing. Dark Tony met him halfway, the two suits clashing again in a storm of light. Tony swung, punched, kicked, fired. Dark Tony countered each move like he was reading Tony's mind 3 seconds ahead. Chakotay watched with rising tension. He's losing, Tuvok nodded. The enemy appears to have tactical superiority in every category. Janeway called out, Harry, find us a weakness, something we can exploit. Harry frantically scanned. Their armor is nearly identical in composition, but the hostile version uses a darker alloy, more advanced, more reactive. It's absorbing some of the energy Tony's firing. Janeway said, Then there must be a way to disrupt it, Paris muttered. Tony better find it first. Outside, Dark Tony seized Tony by the throat mid-flight and slammed him into a large asteroid. Cracks spread across the surface from the force of impact. Tony gasped, his armor struggling to compensate for the crushed plating. Dark Tony leaned in close. You are obsolete, and the universe doesn't need obsolete versions of me. Tony's HUD flickered in and out. His vision blurred. His mind raced. He needed a plan. Any plan. Something. Anything. He whispered, The universe doesn't need monsters either. Dark Tony paused. Monsters win battles. Heroes lose them. Tony grinned weakly. Yeah, but monsters don't have friends. Dark Tony froze for the briefest moment. Enough of a moment. Tony fired his thrusters backward, breaking free of the grip and shooting away. He dodged behind a rotating asteroid, using it as cover. Dark Tony followed instantly, but was forced to slow as debris got in his way. Tony zigzagged through the field, weaving between rocks, using every scrap of chaotic movement he could muster. He opened a channel to Voyager. "Captain, listen carefully," Janeway responded immediately. "Go ahead." Tony dodged another volley that blasted apart a massive asteroid behind him. "I need you to do something risky." Janeway's voice came steady. "We're listening." Tony scanned the field as he flew, analyzing asteroid composition, trajectory, kinetics. "Okay, I need you to lock a tractor beam on the largest rock in this cluster, then push it, hard, right at my coordinates," Chakotay exclaimed. "It'll crush you," Tony muttered. "Not if I move, but it'll hit him, and it'll slow him down enough for me to get inside his armor." Tuvok stated, "That plan is highly dangerous." Tony grinned. "Tuvok, I build weapons out of spare parts in caves. Dangerous is my cardio." Janeway made the decision instantly. "Harry, find the right mass." "Tuvok, prepare the beam." Tony heard Janeway's final words before the tractor beam activated. "Mr. Stark, don't die," Tony whispered. "I'll try my best." Behind him, Dark Tony closed in, repulsors flaring red. Tony turned, letting his damaged armor drift for a moment. He stared at his darker self. In that instant, something shifted in him. Fear mixed with anger. Anger mixed with resolve. Resolve hardened into steel. He whispered inside his helmet, "You're not me." Dark Tony's visor glowed crimson as he prepared another killing blast. And that was the moment Voyager fired the tractor beam. A massive asteroid, kilometers across, began to move, directly toward them both. Dark Tony didn't react fast enough. Tony did. He dove downward, thrusters screaming. Dark Tony turned just in time to see the mountains of rock rushing toward him. The collision shook the void. The asteroid cracked down the center as Dark Tony was swallowed in a blast of dust and stone. When the debris settled, Dark Tony hovered again, but damaged, armor dented, visor cracked, power core flickering. Tony whispered, "Round 2, Dark Tony whispered back. "This changes nothing." But Tony Stark felt something shift. For the first time since the battle began, his other self looked afraid. Tony Stark stared across the void at the armored figure, emerging from the rift, his repulsors dimming as shock spread through him like ice in his veins. The Titan Mark 0 dwindled into the background as the new arrival stepped fully into the Delta Quadrant, the rift ripping open behind the figure like a wound in space itself. Tony felt the hair on the back of his neck rising inside the helmet. The armor on the newcomer was unmistakable, sleek, angular, hostile. It was darker than any suit Tony had ever worn, with crimson highlights glowing like burning embers beneath obsidian plating. The eye slits burned with a cold, predatory white light that pierced the darkness. And the stance, the posture, the signature thruster pulse, even the familiar micro-twitch in the right gauntlet every time the repulsor cycled. All of it was a perfect mirror. Janeway's voice broke the silence, brittle with tension. "Mr. Stark, explain." Tony's voice came out lower than usual, gritted, heavy. "That is Iron Man. But not me. Not my me. That's Iron Man from an alternate future. A future that should never happen." Chakotay's voice sharpened. "A version of you?" Tony heard the question, but couldn't pull his eyes away from the figure. He spoke softly, as if confessing a nightmare he hoped would vanish if he didn't say it too loudly. A version of me who made all the wrong choices, one who didn't stop, one who never listened when people said enough, one who lost everything and decided power was the only answer. The other Iron Man laughed, not loudly, not theatrically, quietly, almost gently, a sound like metal cracking under pressure. "Tony, you always were dramatic." Voyager's crew froze. The voice pattern was unmistakable, calm, smooth, intelligent. Tony Stark's voice, but colder, hollowed out. Every word carried the weight of a man who had walked too far into darkness and refused to come back. Tuvok spoke evenly. "Captain, the energy readings indicate this alternate Stark's armor is outputting levels significantly above Mr. Stark's. Approximately 1,000% higher." Tom Paris muttered. "Great. An evil Stark with God mode." Tony muttered back. "You're not wrong." Janeway straightened. "This is Captain Catherine Janeway of the Federation starship Voyager. Identify yourself." The alternate. Tony tilted his head as if studying her voice like an equation. "I am Iron Legion Sovereign, protector of what remains, conqueror of what is necessary, and salvation for what must be reforged." Tony couldn't help it. He groaned. "Oh, fantastic." He hit the fascist phase. The alternate Stark ignored him. "I am not here for your vessel, Captain Janeway, nor for your crew. I am here for myself." Harry swallowed hard. "The bad one or the good one?" The Sovereign answered calmly. "The incomplete one." Tony barked a laugh, though it sounded tense, forced. "Incomplete? That's bold coming from a walking midlife crisis with thrusters." The Sovereign slowly raised a hand. Repulsors glowed white-hot. "Do not resist." Tony darted sideways instinctively, hovering between Voyager and the Sovereign. "Resist? Buddy, resisting is my love language. You chasing me across dimensions now? What, did you get lonely?" The Sovereign replied, simply. "I cannot be whole without you." Tony faltered. Something in that tone, something familiar yet twisted. Voyager watched him, waiting for him to speak, but Tony wasn't sure how. Janeway took command of the moment. "Mr. Stark, is this individual dangerous?" Tony didn't look away from the Sovereign. "Captain, he's me without limits, without conscience, without people, without pepper, without friends, without loss to teach him anything. He's not just dangerous, he's inevitable." The Sovereign hovered forward, hands still lowered. "This multiverse is dying. I have seen infinite timelines collapse, infinite worlds burning, infinite failures of people like you who refuse to understand what is at stake. I am the answer to survival, and you, Tony, are the missing piece. We were one mind once. We must be again." Tony shook his head violently. "Not happening. You're insane." The Sovereign's eyes flickered. "No, Tony, I am focused." Janeway spoke sharply. "Move Voyager behind him. Tom, adjust position." The Sovereign turned his head without moving his body, tracking their motion effortlessly. "Do not attempt strategy. I see every outcome of this engagement. There is no maneuver you can perform that I have not already calculated." Tony muttered. "Great. A time traveler who thinks he's Google." He raised his hands. Repulsors primed. "Well, let me ruin your search history." Before Janeway could object, Tony shot forward, streaking toward the Sovereign. The Sovereign didn't even flinch. He fired a beam not from his hands, but from a crystalline aperture in his chest. It hit Tony mid-flight, collapsing his momentum instantly. Tony spun out, recovering at the last second before slamming into Voyager's hull. Janeway shouted, "Mr. Stark!" Tony coughed inside the helmet. I'm good, just seeing stars. And a few planets. The Sovereign floated forward. The Titan Mark 0, limping and flickering, drifted behind him like a loyal pet. Tony growled. You brought my failures with you now? That's low even for me, the Sovereign replied with chilling serenity. The Titan is not your failure, it is your legacy. The future requires power, order, precision, control. You lost control, so I took it. Tony barked laughter again, but this time there was no humor in it. You think control solves anything? You think turning into a cosmic dictator is the answer? The Sovereign raised his hand. No, Tony. I am not a dictator. I am the solution. I have undone my weakness. But you still cling to the illusion of choice, of morality, of limits. You are the flaw I carved away. And now I have returned to reclaim the part of myself that still hesitates. Tony stiffened. Captain, he wants to merge our minds. He wants my memories, my humanity, everything. That makes me me. The Sovereign nodded. Once joined, the multiverse can be reforged. With our united intelligence, we can rewrite every failing timeline. No more collapse, no more death, no more entropy, only order. Tuvok spoke with controlled urgency. Captain, he is describing a form of multiversal control that exceeds even the powers of Q. If he succeeds, all realities may be altered. Janeway stepped forward. Iron Legion Sovereign, as captain of this ship, I cannot allow you to forcibly merge consciousness with anyone. The Sovereign regarded her silently. Then Voyager will be removed from the equation. He lifted his hand. Tony's voice snapped like a whip. You touch that ship, and I swear on every engineering manual ever written, I will tear your suit apart atom by atom. The Sovereign paused. You forget, Tony. You cannot harm me. I am you perfected. Tony fired a repulsor blast straight into the Sovereign's face. The beam struck dead center and dispersed harmlessly across a translucent energy veil surrounding the armor. Tony swore loudly. Oh, come on. A reality shield? I didn't even finish designing that tech. The Sovereign replied, I did. He fired a microburst pulse that slammed into Tony's chest. Tony spiraled backward, tumbling helplessly until he righted himself. The Sovereign turned toward the Titan. Activate secondary protocol. The Titan's core flared again, but now, instead of a destabilizer charging outward, the energy bent inward toward the Sovereign, feeding him. His power reading skyrocketed. Tony's HUD went wild with alarms. Oh no, no. Captain, he's absorbing the Titan's power source. He's boosting himself through quantum compression. Janeway turned to Harry. Can we overload it? Harry shook his head. That much energy? If it blows, it'll rip subspace apart. Tony swallowed. Captain, this is going to sound insane even for me. Janeway fired back instantly. Say it. I need to link my suit to yours. The bridge froze. Chakotay blinked. Link. You mean integrate Stark armor with Starfleet systems? Tony nodded. I need more power, not weapons, data, sensors, processing, shield harmonics, navigation overlays. Your warp core's quantum feeds combined with my repulsors will give me enough output to break his reality shield. Tuvok replied. That integration may damage Voyager's systems. Tony shot back. Only if I do it wrong. And believe me, I'm extremely motivated not to kill us all. Janeway made her decision like flipping a switch. Harry, interface relay. Tuvok, prepare shield modulation link. Bilana, divert auxiliary power to the Stark integration channel. Tony drifted toward Voyager. "Open your bay doors and let me patch in." Janeway gave the order. The bay door opened. Tony hovered inside just long enough to connect two armored nodes on his forearms to Voyager's energy grid, coupling just inside the hangar. A surge of power blasted through him. His eyes widened as blue-white energy flooded his systems. His suit hummed with a frequency he had never felt before. Harry announced, "Integration at 60%, 80, 95, stabilizing." Tony exhaled. "Oh yeah, now we're cooking with warp plasma." He shot back out of the bay in a streak of fusion-fed light. The Sovereign turned toward him. "What have you done?" Tony answered with a grin in his voice. "Upgraded." He blasted forward. His repulsors burned hotter than any system he'd ever used. The Sovereign fired a dozen energy beams. Tony dodged every one with terrifying precision. The new data overlays from Voyager lit his HUD with predictive trajectories and shield angles. Tony shouted over the comm, "Let's see you calculate this." He unleashed a warp-fed unibeam straight into the Sovereign's reality shield. Cracks formed. The Sovereign staggered. Impossible. Tony poured every joule of energy he had into the blast. "You think you know every version of me? Here's one you didn't account for. One with a crew. One with allies." The shield shattered in a flash of broken light. Tony rocketed forward and slammed a repulsor-charged punch straight into the Sovereign's chest. Metal dented. Circuits ruptured. The Sovereign flew backward, spinning uncontrollably. For the first time, the Sovereign sounded almost surprised. "You have improved." Tony hovered, breathing hard. "Yeah, turns out I do better when I'm not alone." The rift behind the Sovereign flickered violently. The Titan's remains drifted. The Sovereign steadied himself and raised his head. "This is not over, Tony," Tony replied. "It never is." The Sovereign opened a micro-rift and vanished. The larger rift shrank but did not close. Janeway's voice broke through. "Mr. Stark, stand down, return to the ship." Tony hovered in space, staring at the place the Sovereign had disappeared. His voice was low. "He's not gone, and he won't stop." Janeway softened her tone. "Then we'll be ready, together." Tony slowly turned back toward Voyager, and behind him, unseen, the rift pulsed once, as if waiting, as if watching, as if preparing for the next move. The rift's fading glow reflected against Tony's damaged armor as he slowly drifted back toward Voyager. The ship's running lights flashed gently across the dark void, welcoming him in a way that felt strangely comforting. He had no right to feel comforted, not after what just happened, not after seeing a version of himself so twisted that even Tony Stark felt shaken. He landed inside Voyager's shuttle bay with a metallic thud, boots scraping against the deck as he disengaged his thrusters. His suit smoked in places, plating dented, the left gauntlet cracked and flickering. Tony peeled the helmet back, exposing damp hair plastered to his forehead and eyes still sharp with adrenaline. Janeway strode in the moment the bay doors sealed behind him. She looked determined, but her eyes betrayed tightly controlled worry. Seven followed her with the precise cadence of someone who had calculated 17 outcomes already. B'Elanna, still streaked with grease from engineering, stood near a console, staring at Tony with a mixture of disbelief and irritation that only an engineer could muster after witnessing a weaponized miracle. Janeway spoke first. "Are you injured?" Tony shrugged, immediately wincing at the motion. "Nothing major. Just bruised pride and a cracked rib. Maybe two. Hard to tell. Also might need a new suit. And a drink." In that order, Seven answered dryly. Your physical injuries are minimal. Your emotional instability, however, is substantial. Tony blinked. Wow, thanks. Hadn't noticed. Seven replied. Consider it an observation, not an insult. Tony muttered. Never thought you were the insulting type, just the honest one. Janeway stepped closer. Mr. Stark, we need answers. That thing, that other version of you, what exactly is he? Tony hesitated, rubbing a thumb over the scorched edge of his gauntlet. He's me, a future version, or a version from a divergent reality. Hard to say, harder to accept. He's what happens when I keep escalating, when I stop listening, when I lose everything and decide the answer is to build a cage around the universe. B'Elanna scoffed. You're saying you become that? Tony met her gaze, tired and unguarded. I'm saying I almost did, more than once. The silence after that was heavy. Even Janeway didn't push him further. Finally, Chakotay's voice crackled through the comm. Captain, you're needed on the bridge. The rift's behavior is changing. Janeway nodded grimly. Understood. She turned to Tony. Are you able to join us? Tony straightened. Yeah, suit's half dead, but that's still more than enough. Lead the way, Captain. They headed for the turbo lift, Tony walking instead of flying. His legs protested with every step, but he didn't let it show. When they reached the bridge, the atmosphere was electric with tension. Harry hunched over his console, eyes darting across the rapidly shifting sensor readings. Paris gripped the helm, jaw tight. Tuvok stood at tactical, fingers moving like calm lightning. As Tony stepped onto the bridge, Tuvok spoke without turning. Mr. Stark, your presence will be useful. Tony managed a faint smirk. I love being appreciated by a Vulcan. Really warms the heart. Janeway moved to the command chair. Report. Harry swallowed. Captain, the rift is mutating. The aperture is shrinking in some places, expanding in others. Quantum flux is spiking erratically. It's like it's struggling to stabilize, but it's failing. Tony frowned. Or someone's trying to force it open from the other side. Chakotay gripped his armrest. You think he's coming back? Tony shook his head slowly. No. If Sovereign wanted to come through again right away, he would. He's not subtle. He's not patient. He's calculating. He's regrouping. Janeway looked toward the view screen, where the rift flickered like a wounded star. Then what's happening? Tony stepped toward Harry's console, ignoring the protests of his sore muscles. The suite of Voyager sensors reflected across his HUD in real time, overlaid with his own diagnostics. He studied the readings with intense focus. It's collapsing on itself, he murmured, like it's been cut loose from something anchoring it. Paris frowned. The Titan? Tony nodded. The Titan's destabilizer was acting like a pivot, a bridge. Without it, the rift is losing its grip on this reality. Harry added quickly. But it's not closing cleanly. It's tearing, almost like it's collapsing unevenly. Tony inhaled sharply. That's bad, really bad, Janeway asked. How bad? Tony pointed. If it collapses wrong, it won't just disappear. It'll implode. Quantum vacuum rupture. Best case scenario, we lose subspace stability in a few light years. Worst case, boom, chain reaction. Goodbye, Delta Quadrant. A ripple of fear surged through the room. Paris muttered, Great, a universal bomb, because today wasn't stressful enough. Tony clapped him on the shoulder. Don't worry, I've survived worse. And so have you all. Probably. Janeway cut in quickly. Mr. Stark, can you stabilize it? Tony stared at the rift. Maybe, but I'll need power, a lot of it, and we need to act fast. That thing is unraveling like a broken slinky. Seven stepped forward. What would you require? Tony thought for a moment. I need to recreate the stabilizing frequency that the Titan was producing, but without the part where it explodes. Voyager's deflector dish can generate a modified subspace harmonic. My suit can shape it. Together, we can seal the rift. Harry nodded. Can that work? Tony smiled faintly. It's either that or we run and hope the universe doesn't collapse behind us. I vote for the option with fewer screaming explosions. Janeway didn't hesitate. Make it happen. Tuvok looked up from tactical. Captain, I suggest caution. The rift may resist stabilization. An energy feedback loop could endanger both Mr. Stark and this vessel. Tony waved a hand. Tuvok, I live for energy feedback loops. It's basically my brand. Paris laughed despite the tension. Yeah, checks out. Janeway turned towards Seven. Assist him. Take whatever systems he requires. And Mr. Stark? Tony paused halfway toward the turbo lift. Yeah, Captain. Don't get yourself killed. Tony smiled softly. I'll try to keep it down to a near-death experience. They headed to engineering together. The corridor felt heavier now, dimmer, as if the ship itself sensed the tension. Crew members stepped aside with cautious curiosity as Tony and Seven passed, his armor still sparking intermittently. Inside engineering, B'Elanna was already prepping the deflector modulation. The warp core's hum filled the room with a deep, reassuring pulse. Tony knelt beside an access panel and ripped open part of his arm plating, exposing the damaged conduits beneath. B'Elanna winced. We're doing surgery on the suit now? Tony shrugged. Hey, it's either that or I fight a universe rip in my pajamas. Seven approached the deflector control terminal. These adjustments will require precision. Our success probability is low. Tony smirked. So basically just like every Tuesday back home. She tilted her head. You have unusual Tuesdays. You have no idea. They began syncing their systems. Tony patched conduits. Seven corrected modulation drift. B'Elanna adjusted power transfer rates. Lines of code and data cascaded across the displays as Voyager systems intertwined with Tony's battered armor. Seven announced, synchronization at 70%. Tony wiped sweat from his forehead. Almost there. The warp core pulsed harder, radiating energy into the deflector dish. Tony's suit drank in the power, lights across his chest piece flickering back to full brilliance. Seven spoke again. Synchronization at 92%. Stand by. The room trembled as the rift outside pulsed again, casting a faint glow into engineering. Harry's voice broke through the comms. Captain, the rift is collapsing faster. We may have only minutes before rupture. Janeway replied. Understood. Mr. Stark, advise. Tony closed his eyes for 1 second. Just one. He pictured the Sovereign, the way he spoke, the way he moved, the emptiness in his voice, the crushing weight of knowing that was what Tony Stark could become. Then he opened his eyes. Seven. B'Elanna. Let's save a universe. He'd launched himself toward the deflector access bay. Seven followed, her expression unreadable but resolute. They stepped onto the platform overlooking the deflector dish glowing beneath Voyager's hull. Tony spread his hands. The suit glowed brighter. Okay, Voyager. Time to see what Iron Man and Starfleet engineering can do together. The beam fired. A colossal lance of blue-gold energy streaked from the deflector dish toward the rift. The entire ship vibrated under the recoil. Tony raised his palms, shaping the beam, channeling it, guiding the flow of power like a conductor leading an orchestra. Seven monitored the harmonics. Increase modulation by 0.06. Tony obeyed. The beam intensified. The rift shuddered violently. Come on, hold, hold. The rift twisted, pulled inward, edges sparking with unstable light. It resisted, bucked, lashed out with bursts of quantum fallout that rattled the ship. Harry shouted over comms, "Feedback surge incoming." The beam faltered. Tony felt the force slam into him. His armor screamed with energy, systems overloading. He pushed harder, gritting his teeth. The rift contracted further. B'Elanna yelled from engineering, "Tony, you're drawing too much power. You're going to blow the relays." Tony shouted back, "Better a relay than a universe." The rift spiraled tighter, collapsing like a dying star. One more push. One more. Tony screamed with effort, pressing his palms forward, forcing the beam into a final concentrated strike. The rift's edges snapped inward. Then, with a silent flash of brilliant white light, it sealed. The beam cut off instantly. Tony collapsed to his knees on the platform, gasping for breath, every inch of the suit steaming. Seven stepped forward, her voice almost soft. "You succeeded," Tony coughed. "Yeah, not my worst 5 minutes." Janeway's voice came through the comm, warm and relieved. "Mr. Stark, you did it. Voyager is safe." Tony slowly raised his head. His body felt like lead. His arms trembled, but he managed a tired smile. "Don't thank me yet." Seven looked at him with a puzzled expression. "Why not?" Tony swallowed. "Because that wasn't the last rift." Seven blinked. "Explain." Tony stared through the viewport, where stars shimmered peacefully. "He's still out there, and if I know myself, he's already planning the next move." Seven folded her hands. "Then we will plan ours." Tony exhaled. "Yeah, we will." But something else lingered in his mind. A whisper of energy he'd felt as the rift closed. A resonance. He wasn't sure yet, but he feared the truth. The Sovereign hadn't retreated. He had moved. And Tony Stark knew the game was only beginning. Tony drifted just outside Voyager's hull, the hum of his own armor the only thing grounding him in the aftermath of the battle that had shaken the very fabric of space. The rift, though smaller than before, still pulsed behind him like a malignant wound. Every instinct in Tony's body told him it was not done with them, not even close. He took in a shaky breath inside the helmet and forced his thoughts to still. He needed clarity, not panic. Janeway opened the channel again, her voice firm but touched with concern. "Mr. Stark, report." Tony shook the last sparks loose from his gauntlet and answered. "Alive. Bruised ego. Possible concussion. Armor's at 30% and dropping, but I've had worse days." He paused and then added quietly, "The Sovereign didn't run because I beat him. He ran because he's waiting for something. Or someone." Chakotay's voice followed. "Waiting for what?" Tony stared at the rift. "I wish I knew. And whatever it is, it's not good news." Seven analyzed from the bridge. "The rift's quantum stability is fluctuating in repeating cycles. Not random. It is attempting to synchronize with a foreign frequency." Tony clenched his jaw. "He's calling reinforcements. He wants more than a fight. He wants a war." Janeway made a decision. "Tony, return to Voyager. We'll regroup inside." Tony wanted to object, wanted to keep watching the rift, wanted to be the first thing standing between that thing and the ship, but he knew she was right. He had minutes of flight time left before his suit dropped him like a brick. He drifted toward the open hangar door. A tractor beam locked onto him and carefully reeled him inside. Moments later, he stood on the deck, armor smoking, scorched, dented, cracked. Crew members gathered around with a mixture of awe and alarm. Tony's faceplate peeled open, revealing sweat-plastered hair and a 1,000-yard stare. B'Elanna stormed forward, half furious, half impressed. "That kind of power output should have liquefied you. You're insane." Tony gave a crooked smile. "True, but attractive insane, genius insane, the best kind." The doctor appeared, arms folded. "And concussed, I'd imagine. Take the suit off, now, before you black out and fall face first into the deck plating." Tony raised his hands in surrender. "Fine, fine. But if anyone touches my arc reactor without permission, I sue," Tom Paris called from the entrance of the bay. "Can you even sue in the Delta Quadrant?" Tony shrugged. "I'll start the first law firm out here. Stark, Chakotay, and Tuvok. Has a nice ring to it." Tuvok responded from behind Tom. "I do not practice law." Tony grinned. "Yet." Armor servos unlocked, and the plating folded back, revealing Tony's bruised arms and sweat-soaked shirt. He winced as the doctor scanned him. The doctor clucked in irritation. Mild contusions, micro-fractures along the ribs, a sprained shoulder, and what appears to be a dangerous addiction to dramatic combat. Tony answered, "It's not addiction, it's my love language." The doctor rolled his eyes. "And here I thought your love language was sarcasm," Tony replied. "That too." Chakotay approached with a more serious expression. "Tony, you said the Sovereign came from a future where you failed." Tony swallowed hard. "Not failed. Broke. Snapped so hard I became him. And I don't know how far ahead he is, or how many universes he's crossed. But he's been planning this for a long, long time." Janeway entered the hangar at that moment, her presence commanding attention instantly. "Tony, walk with me." He nodded, pulling the remaining armor plating free and letting it drop with metallic thuds. He followed her to the corridor outside. She faced him squarely. "I need information, fast. What exactly is the Sovereign after? Why does he want you specifically? And what does he gain if he succeeds?" Tony leaned against the wall, suddenly feeling the weight of every injury. "Because, Captain, he's me. And he knows I'm the only person in the multiverse capable of understanding how to stop him, or how to complete him. Guys like him don't want competition. They want assimilation, a hive mind of one." Janeway's expression darkened. "That sounds like the Borg," Tony nodded. "Except he thinks he's better, way better, and he's convinced he's the answer to every universal problem. His logic probably goes something like, if one Tony Stark is good, two is better. 1 billion is ideal, and free will is optional." Janeway exhaled slowly. "That is horrifying." Tony pushed off the wall. "That's why I left my Earth. That's why I scrapped prototypes like the Titan. I saw where that path leads, and he's the proof." Seven arrived at that moment. The rift is expanding again. Stabilization waveforms indicate forced synchronization. He is attempting to reopen a larger aperture. Janeway's spine stiffened. Bridge. Now. They all moved quickly, Tony still sore, but adrenaline pulled him forward. As they stepped onto the bridge, the view screen displayed the rift pulsing in steady intervals, each wave widening the tear. Harry spoke without turning. "Captain, I can't stop the expansion. It's feeding on subspace distortions from the Titan's remains," Tuvok added. "It is also responding to an external signal, originating from beyond our sensor range." Tony tensed. "That's him. He's anchoring it remotely." Janeway crossed her arms. "Options. B'Elanna's voice came through the comm. "Captain, the warp core is stabilized. If we modulate our deflector to counter frequency, we might slow the expansion. But only slow." Tony snapped his fingers. "No, we need to reverse the polarity of the rift. Pull it inward. Force collapse instead of containment." Seven replied, "That requires extraordinary precision. 0.1% too high, and the rift will rupture into a catastrophic event." Janeway asked, "Can you calculate it?" Seven paused. "I can." Tony stepped beside her. "I'll help." "Two brains are better than one," Seven corrected him. "In your case, evidence suggests that depends on which version of you is present." Tony grinned. "True, but I'm the charming one." Seven sighed quietly, but didn't argue. Janeway gave them the nod. "Do it." Tony and Seven moved to the engineering console. His fingers flew across the interface, inputting equations at a speed that made Paris raise an eyebrow. Data scrolled across the screen, graphs updating in real time. Seven worked beside him in seamless synchrony. After a minute, Tony murmured, "You know, you're terrifyingly smart," Seven replied calmly. "That is not a compliment. It is a statistical observation." Tony smirked. It was meant as both. Seven didn't look up, but the faintest hint of amusement flickered through her voice. "Acceptable." The rift pulsed again, harder, larger. Red lightning crackled around its edges. Tuvok announced, "A new energy signature is emerging from the aperture." Harry looked up at Janeway with dread. "Captain, something's coming through." The bridge held its breath. Then it appeared. Metal, black, massive. A massive object began forcing its way through the rift. At first it resembled a ship, but as more of it emerged, the truth became clear. Tony felt his heart stop. "That's one of mine. That's an Iron Legion dreadnought," Paris stammered. "You built that?" Tony shook his head violently. "No, I abandoned the concept years ago. It was too dangerous, too unstable, too uncontrollable. I deleted every file." Seven responded, clearly not sufficiently. The dreadnought crawled through the rift like a machine birthing itself. Towering armored plates, weapon arrays the size of shuttlecraft, glowing red slits across its hull. Janeway whispered, "How many weapons does that thing have?" Tony said grimly. "Enough to crack the moon." And that's when I was designing responsibly. The dreadnought fully emerged, followed by smaller drones swirling around it like hornets around a hive. The Sovereign's voice echoed across every channel, every screen, every speaker. "I told you this was not over." Tony felt a chill run down his spine. "He's here." The Sovereign appeared atop the dreadnought, suspended in the void like a god surveying his domain. His armor burned brighter than before, powered by the energy he had stolen. Tony whispered, "He brought an army." The Sovereign spoke with impossible calm. "Tony Stark, Voyager, you have delayed the inevitable long enough. Surrender him, and your universe will be spared. Resist, and you will be erased." Janeway stepped forward. "We don't surrender our crew members. Ever." The Sovereign laughed softly. "He is not your crew. He is mine." Tony stepped forward beside Janeway, ignoring the pain in his side. "You want me? Come and get me. But you're not touching them," the Sovereign answered. "You are not in a position to negotiate." Tony turned to Janeway. "Captain, get your ship ready. Shields up. Red alert." Janeway nodded firmly. "Do what you need to do." The Sovereign raised his hand. Drones surged forward in a wave of red light. Tony lit his repulsors. The battle for the future began. Tony hovered in silence for a moment that felt like it stretched across entire star systems. The echo of the Sovereign's retreat still hung in the vacuum like a bad aftertaste, the kind that lingered even after the threat slipped back into whatever dark corner of the multiverse it crawled from. Voyager drifted quietly behind him, battered, scorched, but standing strong. Janeway had once told her crew that Voyager didn't bow to anything, and Tony found himself believing her more with every passing crisis. Tony finally exhaled, letting the fatigue settle into his bones. The rift was still open, pulsing faintly like a cosmic heartbeat that refused to die. He hated that. It felt like unfinished business staring him in the face, daring him to say it didn't matter when every instinct screamed otherwise. Janeway's voice came through his helmet, softer than usual. "Mr. Stark, return to the ship. We need to regroup." Tony turned toward Voyager slowly. His armor was scarred, his reactor levels dangerously low, and his head throbbed from a dozen near-death experiences. "Sounds like a Tuesday," he muttered. Chakotay responded dryly. "Only if your Tuesdays involve collapsing space-time." Tony smirked. "Sometimes. Depends on my mood and caffeine levels." He drifted toward the hangar bay and landed inside with a clatter that echoed through the chamber. His armor shut down piece by piece until he was left standing in dim lights with little more than adrenaline holding him upright. He stepped off the platform and almost stumbled, catching himself on the railing. The doctor materialized beside him instantly with his usual mix of annoyance and concern. "You know, Mr. Stark, it would be lovely if you didn't attempt to die every time you step outside this ship. It would make my job significantly easier." Tony groaned, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Buddy, trust me, it's not exactly on my checklist either. But evil doppelganger supervillain versions of myself aren't known for their scheduling courtesy." The doctor narrowed his eyes. "Fascinating. You truly are incapable of taking medical advice seriously." Tony gave a little shrug. "Comes with the territory. Genius brain, poor self-preservation instincts, incredibly good hair, occupational hazards." 7 of 9 appeared at the hangar entrance. Her expression was as controlled as ever, though Tony thought he detected the faintest flicker of something else behind her eyes. She approached with her usual precision. "Your neural stress indicators are elevated, your armor sustained significant damage, and your behavior was reckless." Tony looked at her. "You forgot handsome." 7 blinked once. That was not relevant. Tony grinned despite the pain. "It never is until I remind people." 7 ignored the remark. She turned to Janeway and Chakotay, who had entered behind her. "Captain, the alternate Stark's armor exhibited advanced power modulation capabilities beyond Mr. Stark's technology. His integration with quantum instability fields suggests he has adapted his systems for multiversal traversal." Janeway replied, "Which means he can return anytime." 7 nodded. "Probability is high." Tony exhaled, shoulders tight. "Yeah, he'll be back." He doesn't take no for an answer. Or yes, or maybe. Guy's worse than my worst habits. Chakotay stepped forward. "Then we need a way to counter him." Tony shook his head. "You don't counter him, you survive him. That's the best I've ever managed. He's everything I could be if I didn't have guardrails, if I didn't have people. He's what happens when Tony Stark goes unchecked." Janeway studied him. "And you think he'll come for you again?" Tony nodded slowly. "Oh yeah, he's not done. Not even close. That guy, he doesn't see enemies. He sees variables. And in his mind, I'm the variable that needs to be absorbed or eliminated." The doctor interjected, His mental state appears rather unhealthy. Tony raised an eyebrow. Oh, you think? What gave it away? The homicidal monologue? The multiverse destruction? The fact that he punched me into an asteroid like he was swatting a bug? The doctor huffed. My diagnostic capabilities are far more nuanced than that. Tony gave a tired chuckle. I know, Doc. Just trying to laugh before the next apocalyptic threat pops out of a wormhole. Janeway crossed her arms. Mr. Stark, I need you to be honest with me. How do we stop someone who knows every version of you? Tony leaned against the railing, taking a few slow breaths. You don't, not directly. You outthink him. You mislead him. You beat him by not being the Tony he expects. That guy has calculated every move I would logically make. He's a supercomputer wearing my ego. But what he doesn't have is Voyager, Seven asked. Explain. Tony looked up at her. You. All of you. He's never encountered a Starfleet crew before. He's never met Janeway. He's never tried to predict a Borg-human hybrid with trauma-based intuition algorithms. He's never seen a Maquis-trained first officer read a battlefield in seconds. He's never dealt with Tuvok's logic or B'Elanna's engineering wizardry. He's never met Neelix. Actually, scratch that last one. No one should meet Neelix unprepared, Seven interjected calmly. Are you suggesting that our unpredictable behavior is an asset? Tony smiled faintly. Seven, your unpredictable behavior is terrifying and exactly what we need. Seven considered that for a moment. Acceptable. The lights flickered slightly. Janeway looked up. Bridge to engineering. Report. B'Elanna's voice answered. Captain, the rift's energy fluctuations are affecting ship-wide systems. It's destabilizing faster now that the Titan's power isn't feeding into it. Janeway frowned. How long until it collapses? B'Elanna responded grimly. Hard to say. It could be minutes or seconds. Tony stood straighter. If it collapses right now, we're going to get hit with enough quantum turbulence to knock this ship into next Tuesday. Chakotay nodded. And if it expands, Tony answered, then we're all going to need new gravitational constants, Janeway said firmly. Bridge, now. The crew moved. Tony followed, armor sparking weakly but functional enough for mobility. As they stepped onto the bridge, the view screen displayed the rift swirling violently, tearing open and slamming shut in rapid pulses. Space trembled like a muscle twitching through pain. Harry spoke quickly. Captain, the rift is destabilizing on multiple axes. The quantum lattice is collapsing in on itself. If it implodes, it could send a subspace shockwave across 100 light years. Janeway replied. And if it explodes? Harry swallowed. We won't be alive long enough to care. Tony gazed at the rift intensely. It's not closing on its own. The energy's too chaotic. We need a stabilizing anchor. Seven turned to him. The Titan acted as a stabilizer. Without it, the aperture is degrading. Tony nodded. Exactly. Without an anchor, it's like trying to seal a pressure breach with a marshmallow. Tom Paris muttered, Can confirm that doesn't work. The deck shook as the rift spat out a torrent of ionized debris. Tuvok added, The aperture continues expanding. We must act immediately. Janeway turned to Tony. Ideas? Tony pressed his palms together, thinking at high speed. Okay. The Titan stabilized the rift because its core was tuned to match the dimensional frequency the Sovereign used. If we can replicate that frequency with something else, something less explodey, we can slow the collapse long enough to close it safely. Janeway asked, And do we have anything capable of replicating that frequency? Tony paused, then grinned. Yeah, me. Seven blinked. Elaborate. Tony opened his suit interface, pulling up reactor parameters. My arc reactor runs on a harmonic that's structurally similar to the Titan's quantum source. That's why the rift reacted when I arrived. My suit was never meant for dimensional travel, but the energy signature was close enough to get me sucked through like a cosmic vacuum cleaner. Tom whistled. So you're saying your armor is like a mini Titan? Tony shrugged. A less violent, less murder-happy version? Yeah. Chakotay looked grave. And connecting yourself to the rift won't kill you? Tony lifted a hand. Oh, definitely might. But it'll kill all of you if I don't. Janeway spoke, voice low but resolute. Mr. Stark, if there's another option... Tony cut her off. Captain, I appreciate it, really. But this is what I do. I fix things I break. And sometimes I break things I didn't even know I touched. This rift dragged me across universes, but now I'm here, and I'm not letting it destroy everything just because my evil twin has boundary issues. Janeway studied him. Stark, you're not responsible for everything that comes through a rift. Tony smiled faintly. I know, but I am responsible for what I do with it. Seven stepped forward. Your plan has flaws, numerous flaws. Tony nodded. Yep, welcome to every plan I've ever made. Seven looked at him longer this time, then said, with a voice barely above a whisper, be careful. Tony's eyes softened. Always, Seven. Well, almost always. He launched out of the bridge, armor igniting as he soared through the hangar and into open space. The rift pulsed violently ahead. Tony aligned himself directly in front of it. His reactor hummed as he amplified its output. Inside the rift, shadows moved. Tony spoke quietly to himself. Okay, time to stabilize a collapsing cosmic anomaly with a glorified watch battery. No pressure. He felt the rift pulling on him immediately. His armor vibrated violently, energy streams latching onto him like tendrils. On Voyager, alarms flared. Tuvok reported, Captain, the rift is sinking to Stark's signature. Harry added, it's working. But the strain on his suit? Seven interrupted. His suit will not withstand this level of harmonic feedback. Chakotay added, neither will his body. Tony shouted over the comms, hey, I can hear you, not helping. He pushed more energy into the rift. It began to react. Its edges shrank. Its pulsations slowed. Janeway leaned forward. Steady, Mr. Stark. Just a little more. Tony felt his reactor overheating. His HUD warned of full structural failure. His bones felt like they were vibrating. Then a voice whispered through the distortion. You cannot seal what I have opened. Tony's heart froze. The Sovereign's voice. From inside the rift. Tony said, I really was hoping you got lost in the cosmic sewer, but no, here you are. The Sovereign whispered again. You are delaying the inevitable. The multiverse will bend or break, and you will too, Tony snarled. You want me? Get in line. He fired his repulsors one last time. The rift convulsed. It began to close. Voyager trembled. Seven whispered, it's working, but then a hand burst from the collapsing rift. A metal hand, grabbing Tony by the forearm. The Sovereign's voice growled. If you want to seal the door, Stark, then seal it from the inside. The rift surged open again, dragging both of them toward its center like a black hole hungry for prey. Tony shouted, no! The rift swallowed them both in a flash. Voyager jolted violently as the aperture snapped shut. Silence flooded the bridge. Seven whispered the words none of them wanted to hear. Tony Stark is gone. The astrometrics lab hummed with quiet intensity, the walls alive with holographic projections of star fields and shifting energy patterns. Voyager's path through the Delta Quadrant was traced in a thin blue line that snaked across the center display, while around it, clusters of anomalies and sensor contacts flickered. In the middle of it all stood 7 of 9, fingers moving with effortless precision through the controls, her expression focused and unreadable. Tony watched the rotating model of the rift they'd encountered, rendered as a 3-dimensional matrix of interlocking energy filaments. It looked like a cracked crystal caught in mid-explosion, frozen at the exact moment of fracture. The Sovereign's signature was embedded within it like a cancer. Tony folded his arms, leaning back against a console. So that's the hole in reality I fell through. Gotta say, the view from the outside is not an improvement. 7 did not look up. The rift parameters continue to evolve. It is not a stable phenomenon. It is adapting. Tony frowned. Rifts don't adapt. Machines do. Minds do. Not holes in space. 7 replied. This is not a traditional spatial anomaly. It appears to be a constructed interface between quantum states, designed, weaponized, and yes, adaptive. Tony's gaze hardened. You're saying he made it? 7 tapped a control. The central projection zoomed in, highlighting faint threads of energy connecting to distant points in space. We have detected synchronized quantum fluctuations along these vectors. If my analysis is correct, each of these lines represents an anchor point, a location in space where the fabric of reality has been weakened to support potential rift formation. Tony straightened. Like a network, a lattice. 7 nodded. Correct. An interdimensional substrate. It spans multiple regions of the Delta Quadrant, and likely multiple universes. Harry, standing at another console, swallowed hard. You mean he could open more of those things, anywhere along that lattice? 7 answered. Yes, and he most likely will. Tony exhaled slowly. Great. So, not only did evil me invent a universe-breaking door, he installed Wi-Fi all over the quadrant. Harry looked at Tony with uneasy admiration. You realize your alternate version has access to something akin to Q-level capabilities. If he can control when and where these rifts open, Tony finished the thought, then he can reach into any version of me he wants. Pull me out, drop weapons in, rearrange the furniture, rewrite the rules. 7 turned to face him finally. That is his intention, to consolidate power, to control the multiverse, and to eliminate what he perceives as defective iterations of himself. Tony winced. Defective? Yeah, that sounds about right. Janeway stepped into astrometrics then, Chakotay at her side. Report. 7 gestured to the holographic lattice. Analysis confirms that the rift was not a random accident. It is one node in a distributed network of possible apertures. The alternate Stark appears to be using the Delta Quadrant as a staging ground for multiversal traversal. Chakotay frowned. Why here? Why not closer to Federation space? 7 answered. The Delta Quadrant is far from any central regulatory structure or interdimensional policing force. It is distant, chaotic, strategically advantageous. And Voyager's presence here presents a statistical anomaly he cannot ignore. Janeway turned to Tony. He's targeting you, but he's doing it where no one can interfere. Tony rubbed his forehead. Story of my life. Every cosmic lunatic wants a private audience. Janeway's tone shifted from analytic to sharp. The bigger question is, what's his timeline? How long until he makes his next move? 7 slid new data onto the main projection. Energy readings from the collapsed rift show residual flux. Based on decay patterns and cross-correlated fluctuations along the lattice, I predict another rift opening within the next 8 hours. Harry blinked. 8 hours? That's barely enough time for diagnostics, Tony muttered. That's barely enough time for coffee, Chakotay asked quietly. Location? 7 highlighted a point on the lattice far ahead of Voyager's current position. Here, a region of space with increased subspace turbulence and a dense concentration of proto-nebular matter, ideal for hiding large-scale energy events. Janeway studied it. Distance? 2 hours at maximum warp, 7 replied. Janeway didn't hesitate. Tom, adjust course. Maximum warp. Get us there before he does. Paris's voice came through the comm. Aye, Captain. Altering heading now. The star field on the display shifted as Voyager changed direction, plunging deeper toward the predicted anomaly site. Tony watched the swirling lattice for a moment, then looked at Janeway. Okay, that gets us in the neighborhood, but we still have a problem. Janeway looked back. Just one? Tony pointed at the Rift model. He is stronger than me. His tech is more advanced. He's running code I never wrote, using designs I never finalized. He's seen more timelines than I've seen takeout menus. I can't just outpunch him. I tried. It went poorly, Chakotay said. But with Voyager integrated into your systems, you were able to crack his reality shield. Tony nodded. Yeah, because I cheated. I piggybacked off your ship. I borrowed your brain. That's not a long-term fix. If he adapts his shield to block Starfleet frequencies, we lose that edge. 7 considered him, eyes cool but not unkind. Then you must adapt as well. Tony shot her a look. Adapt how? You want to install Borg implants in my spine? 7 raised a single brow. That would be inefficient and aesthetically unpleasant. He smirked despite himself. See, you do care about aesthetics, she almost smiled. Only when they impact function. Janeway looked between them. What are you suggesting, 7? 7 approached Tony, studying his arc reactor. His suit is built around a centralized high-density power core. Energy flows outward from a single point, efficient but vulnerable. The Sovereign's designs likely incorporate distributed systems, redundant pathways, and quantum shunts. That makes him more resilient. Tony sighed. So my heart's a single point of failure. Join the club. 7 ignored the quip. Voyager's systems, by contrast, are modular, redundant. We could mirror that principle in your armor. Integrate additional energy nodes throughout the suit. Create localized subcores that can maintain function even if one core is compromised. Tony rubbed his chin. Distributed power, like a neural network for energy. Less like a heart, more like a circulatory system. 7 nodded. Precisely, Chakotay added. It will also make it harder for him to disable you with a single lucky hit. Tony glanced at Janeway. That's going to mean ripping out some of my old architecture, possibly all of it. Janeway met his gaze steadily. Then rip it out. If it keeps him from merging minds with you, I'll dismantle that suit myself. Tony smirked. You say the sweetest things. He turned to 7. Fine. You're the Borg-adapted, hyper-efficient super analyst. Help me upgrade. 7 inclined her head. I anticipated that request. I have already designed 3 possible enhancement frameworks. Tony blinked. You've been redesigning my armor behind my back? 7 answered simply. Yes. She brought up 3 rotating schematics of Tony's suit on the central projection, each overlaid with green Borg-style optical patterns. One featured additional energy nodes in the shoulders and hips. Another had a new subcore mounted along the spine, tied into the dorsal thrusters. The third distributed microscale reactors along the limb plating. Tony whistled softly. "Okay, I take it back. You and I would make terrifying lab partners," Seven said. "That was the conclusion of my analysis as well," Harry whispered. "Remind me never to let them both into engineering without supervision." Janeway pressed on. "How long?" Seven replied. "If Mr. Stark assists and B'Elanna provides integration support, we can complete a preliminary refit in 3 hours." Chakotay frowned. "That's cutting it close." Janeway's eyes narrowed with resolve. "Do it, all of you. Whatever he's planning, I want Iron Man ready when we reach that node." Tony gave a half salute. "Yes, ma'am. Just promise me you won't let the hologram try to install anything." The doctor's voice came over the comm. "I heard that, Mr. Stark, and for the record, I install things perfectly." Tony grinned. "I'm sure you do, just not in me." Later, in engineering, the warp core's pulse became the rhythm Tony worked to. B'Elanna handed him components with brisk efficiency, occasionally muttering to herself in Klingon when something refused to align. Seven moved around him like a chess player, rearranging pieces on a living board, adjusting field emitters, recalibrating couplers, and rerouting power conduits. Tony lay on a diagnostic table with most of his upper armor removed, the arc reactor glowing in his exposed chest plate. Cable clusters ran from the reactor to hovering tool rigs and Voyager's consoles. It reminded him uncomfortably of the cave where he'd first built the Mark I armor. Only this time, he wasn't alone with scrap metal and a box of painkillers. He had a half-Klingon engineer, an ex-Borg tactical analyst, and a starship's entire power grid at his disposal. Progress, he thought. B'Elanna snapped a new module into place along his left forearm. This auxiliary power node will draw off the main core and store it as a buffer. You should be able to divert power through it if the arc reactor overloads, Seven added. 3 more nodes will be installed in your lower back, right thigh, and upper right chest plate. Combined, they will reduce total system failure probability by 43%. Tony grimaced. "Still a 57% chance I end up as interdimensional dust." B'Elanna smirked. 57% is practically a guarantee we'll survive, by Voyager standards. Seven began aligning the spinal subcore. "You willingly engage in high-risk operations routinely. You have a historical pattern of disregarding self-preservation." Tony looked at her sideways. Wow, that almost sounded like concern. Seven kept working. "It is an observation, nothing more." He smiled faintly. "For someone with no emotions, you do a great impression of someone who cares whether I live or die." Seven paused, meeting his eyes. "I understand the strategic value of your survival. You represent a significant tactical advantage against a multiversal threat. Losing you would be inefficient." Tony's smile broadened. "Right. Tactical asset. Got it. Still, I'll take it." B'Elanna rolled her eyes. "Can we save the awkward, almost flirting until after we keep evil you from rewriting reality?" Tony chuckled. "No promises." The intercom chimed softly. "Janeway to engineering. Report." B'Elanna replied, "We're nearly done, Captain. Final calibration in progress." Seven checked the readings. "Integration complete. Power distribution stable. Suit. Functionality has increased by an estimated 28% in combat scenarios and 41% in sustained energy resistance." Tony flexed his hands experimentally as his armor sealed itself back around him. The new nodes hummed under his plating, subtle but powerful. His HUD lit with expanded interfaces, multiple core readouts, redundant energy pathways, enhanced failsafe controls. He rotated his shoulders. Feels good, like putting on a tailored war crime. B'Elanna snorted. You have a charming way with metaphors. Seven stepped back. Be advised, the new systems are untested in live combat. Adaptation will be required. Tony floated up off the diagnostic table, repulsors humming with a deeper resonance. Adaptation is what I do, and if he's really me, then he'll never see this version coming. Janeway's voice came again. Bridge to Stark. We're dropping out of warp at the predicted rift location. Get to the hangar. Tony turned toward the exit. On my way. As he left engineering, he could feel Seven's gaze linger on him for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. He didn't comment, but he noticed. On the bridge, the view screen displayed a swirling maelstrom of dark purple and deep blue clouds. The nebular matter churned like storm fronts, lit from within by distant, flickering energy discharges. At the heart of it all, space twisted in a slow, sickening spiral, as if someone had taken hold of the universe and begun to wring it out. Harry's voice quivered, just slightly. We are at the predicted node, Captain. Subspace distortions are off the charts. Tuvok added. I am detecting a buildup of quantum flux along the lattice threads. It is consistent with rift pre-formation. Janeway squared her shoulders. He's coming. Tony stepped onto the bridge, armor fully sealed, eyes focused. Then we meet him, head on. Janeway nodded once, firmly. Mr. Stark, this might be our only chance to stop him before he can expand his network. Whatever happens out there, know this. You are not alone. Tony looked at her, genuinely moved. Captain, you keep saying that. I'm starting to believe you. Paris smirked. Just try not to scratch the paint this time. Tony rolled his shoulders. No promises. The nebula outside shuddered. A point of absolute blackness appeared at its center. Then it tore open in a flash of red light. The rift yawned wide, its edges screaming with energy, and something enormous began to emerge. Tony's HUD filled with outlines and predictive models as the shape forced its way through. It wasn't a drone, or a titan, or a mere suit. It was a fortress, a mobile citadel of armor and weaponry built on the scale of a small moon, bristling with Stark tech weapon emplacements and radiating the Sovereign's sickeningly familiar energy signature. Tony whispered, Oh, okay, that's new. Janeway inhaled sharply. What in the name of... Harry finished for her, awestruck and horrified. That's a ship. Tony corrected softly. Not a ship, a throne. At its heart, a brighter core pulsed. The Sovereign had not just come alone, he had brought his empire with him, and the Delta Quadrant was his new proving ground. Tony hovered in the dim light outside Voyager's hull, the last echoes of the previous battle still ringing through his suit. His systems were stabilizing, repairing at a sluggish pace. He felt the ache in every muscle, the weight of exhaustion settling behind his eyes, and the constant buzzing thought that the Sovereign wasn't finished. The rift still pulsed in the distance, swollen and sick with energy, like a wound the universe had grown too tired to close. Behind him, the vast protective canopy of Voyager stood stalwart, steadfast, and incredibly fragile in the face of multiversal chaos. Tony let out a long exhale. He felt strangely calm, even though nothing about their circumstances warranted calmness. It was the calm that came after too many fights, when adrenaline had burned away and only awareness remained. Janeway's voice broke the silence gently. "Mr. Stark, we have readings stabilizing, but the situation is far from resolved. We need you back aboard." Tony didn't answer immediately. His gaze stayed fixed on the rift. It pulsed again, weaker than before, but still very much alive. A reminder, a threat, a promise. Finally, he answered. "Captain, I'm coming in." He drifted through the hangar doors and landed on the deck with a heavy, weary thud. His armor hissed as it powered down partially, plating shifting as if the suit itself was exhausted. B'Elanna Torres and 7 of 9 were already waiting, flanked by 2 engineers who looked equal parts curious and terrified of the man who had just fought 2 versions of himself back to back. 7 spoke first, clinical as ever. "Your suit requires recalibration. Several subsystems are operating at dangerously low thresholds." Tony rolled his shoulder. "Yeah, well, when the multiverse tries to kill you, you tend to lose some structural integrity." B'Elanna scowled at him, though concern flickered in her eyes. "You keep pushing that armor like this, and it's going to collapse around you. Or explode. Very possibly explode." Tony shrugged. "Everything I build explodes eventually. It's part of the charm." 7 observed him more closely. "You are injured." Tony lifted a hand dismissively. "I've been injured since I built the first suit. It's tradition." 7 stared at him in that direct, almost uncomfortable way she had. "Tradition is an inefficient mechanism for survival." Tony paused, then laughed despite the pain. "You know, I really missed blunt honesty." "Thanks, 7, B'Elanna interjected, directing a tricorder at his chest. "You're running on fumes. We can stabilize your suit for short bursts, but you need downtime." Tony shook his head. "Can't. You both saw that rift. You saw Sovereign vanish into it. That wasn't him retreating. That was him regrouping. He's coming back." 7's gaze narrowed. "You concluded this from the energy fluctuations?" Tony turned toward the rift visible through the hangar shield. "No, I concluded it because I know me, even the worst me, especially the worst me." Janeway entered the bay, hands clasped behind her back, hair slightly disheveled in a way only exhaustion and command pressure could cause. She took in the scene with a calm, measured sweep of her eyes. "Report," 7 answered swiftly. "Mr. Stark requires medical attention. His armor is compromised. His neurological stress markers are elevated." Tony interrupted. "I'm fine, really." Janeway gave him a stern look. "Mr. Stark, stand down." Tony sighed loudly. "You know, Captain, I didn't come to the Delta Quadrant to be bossed around by someone with better hair than me." Janeway didn't even blink. "Doctor to the hangar bay. Now." Tony muttered something that sounded like grumbling resignation as the doctor materialized beside him in a shimmer of humming photons. "Oh, look," the doctor said, sarcasm dripping. "Another Stark in need of repairs. What an unexpected development." Tony replied, "Doc, if you start charging me for overtime, I'm switching to hologram-free healthcare." The doctor scanned him with irritated precision. "Your self-preservation instincts are embarrassingly low, even for you." Tony shrugged. "Occupational hazard." Janeway's voice softened slightly as she looked at him. "Mr. Stark, we can't help if you don't let us." Tony's eyes flicked down, then back up, and Janeway saw something she hadn't seen in him before. Fear, not of the rift, not of the Sovereign, but fear of what he might become. He finally said, "Fine, patch me up." But keep the suit powered. He's coming back, and I need to be ready. Seven observed him closely. You assume the Sovereign will strike soon? Tony nodded. He's not the type to cut his losses. If he left, it's only because he found a better angle. Janeway stepped closer. Then we need to prepare too. Voyager can't withstand another attack of that magnitude without upgrades, and you're the only one who understands that technology. Tony perked up despite himself. Captain, are you telling me you want Stark tech mods on your ship? Janeway exhaled. Just this once. Tony grinned like a kid at Christmas. Oh, I'm going to enjoy this. B'Elanna groaned. Oh no, 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 no. No experiments with the warp core, no fusion reactors inside the nacelles, and absolutely no, Tony interrupted dramatically. B'Elanna, please, would I ever do anything that crazy? She stared at him. Yes, constantly. Tony placed a hand over his chest. I am wounded, the doctor growled. Let him be wounded in sickbay, please. Janeway nodded. Good idea. Mr. Stark, you will follow the doctor. Tony raised his hands in surrender. Fine, fine. To the holographic prison ward we go. Seven turned to Janeway. Captain, before he is taken, there is something you must see. Tony stopped mid-step. Uh-oh, that's never a good line. Seven walked to a console and activated a display. The holographic projection showed a set of energy signatures extracted from Tony's armor, layered with readings, gathered from the rift. Janeway frowned. What are we looking at? Seven began her explanation with cutting precision. The rift is not merely a portal. It is a rupture between layered realities. Each layer corresponds to a different potential timeline. The arrival of the Sovereign has created a cascading instability. The rift cannot be closed until all active temporal anchors within it are neutralized. Tony raised an eyebrow. English, Seven continued. The Sovereign is an anchor. If he remains alive within the fracture, the rift will continue to reopen. Janeway's expression hardened. So we need to stop him, Seven answered simply. Permanently. Tony swallowed. I was afraid you'd say that. Janeway stepped closer to the display. Can we track him? Seven shook her head. Not precisely. He is shifting through micro-fractures in the rift. Every time we scan for him, the readings change. But he will re-emerge soon. His power readings are increasing. He is drawing energy from the multiversal collapse. Tony rubbed his forehead. So he's using the end of everything as a battery. Cute. Real cute. The doctor crossed his arms. Mr. Stark, if he returns while you're in your current condition, you will not survive the encounter. Tony stared down at his gauntlet. I know. He looked toward Janeway and spoke quietly. He won't stop at me, Captain. He won't stop at your ship or your universe. He'll burn through this reality like he burned through mine, and then he'll keep going. Janeway met his eyes with fierce resolve. Then we don't let him. Tony nodded slowly. I need to get back in fighting shape, and you need your ship upgraded. We do this together, or we don't do it at all. Janeway gave a firm nod. Then let's move. Everyone prepare for multiversal breach defense. The doctor huffed, grabbing Tony by the arm. And you, sickbay. Tony let himself be led away, but not before he cast one last glance at the rift. It pulsed again, slow, steady, alive. Tony whispered under his breath, to no one but himself. I'm coming for you. The rift snapped with a flicker of crimson light, as if whispering back. And the universe held its breath, waiting for the storm that was coming. The Delta Quadrant felt wrong. Voyager drifted through a region of space that was impossibly still, impossibly quiet. as if the void itself were holding its breath. Sensors trembled with residual distortions that had no measurable origin, no discernible source. The aftershocks of the last encounter with the sovereign Iron Man still hummed across every deck plate like a phantom vibration. Tony Stark stood in the center of the astrometrics lab, his helmet retracted, his expression set in a rigid line of determination mixed with something heavier. Not fear, not exhaustion, something colder, something like inevitability. 7 of 9 monitored a cascade of data strings on the main screen, her fingers moving with mechanical efficiency. Chakotay stood near the door, arms crossed, watching Tony with the mixed caution and trust that he found increasingly necessary with their volatile guest. 7 spoke without looking at him. Long-range sensors have detected further quantum fluctuations. They match the signature of the rift that brought both versions of you here. Tony exhaled through clenched teeth. Yeah, figures. He's not done. Not even close. Chakotay stepped forward. Do we know if he's trying to reopen the rift or force a new one? Tony replied. Both. Probably. He doesn't do backup plans. He does inevitability. If he wants me, he'll break the fabric of reality apart to make it happen. 7 analyzed the data. These fluctuations are increasing. The frequencies suggest active manipulation. He is building towards something. Tony paced. The Sovereign wasn't bluffing. He wants to merge, not physically, mentally. He wants my memories, my experiences, every decision I ever made that didn't twist me into a nightmare. He thinks he can overwrite himself with the parts of me that didn't fall off the deep end. Chakotay frowned. Why would he want that? Tony stopped. Because he thinks the universe needs one Iron Man, one perfect version, one mind controlling everything. And if I don't join him willingly, he'll take me apart like a spare processor and plug the pieces he wants into his own head. 7 studied him. You believe he requires you to complete his objective. Tony gave a humorless smile. 7. When you get 2 versions of me in the same universe, one of them is going to be wrong. And I'm betting it's not me. The screens flickered. Harry's voice came through the comm. Captain to Astrometrics. Report to the bridge immediately. You're going to want to see this. Tony's stomach dropped. He sprinted for the door. When he reached the bridge, Janeway was already standing at the center, her posture iron, her expression taut. The crew moved around her, tense, alert, focused. Harry's hands trembled slightly over the console. Captain, look. The main screen lit up with images of the stars ahead, warping, bending, twisting inward as though a cosmic whirlpool was forming in the middle of the void. Swirls of purple and white. Energy crackled like electric storms across a curved event horizon. Tuvok analyzed instantly. The anomaly is widening at an accelerating rate. Quantum instability is increasing. Something is pushing through. Tom Paris said quietly. It's him, isn't it? Tony didn't answer. He couldn't. The anomaly shuddered, then split open. The sovereign Iron Man stepped through. But this time, he did not arrive alone. Behind him towered a massive armored construct, larger than Voyager itself, moving with slow inevitability. A colossal Iron Legion warship. A floating fortress made of interlocking Stark technology and harvested multiversal scrap. Its armor plates full of jagged scars. Its reactor glowing red like a dying star. Tony whispered, "Oh no, 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 no." He brought the Helion array. Janeway turned sharply. The what? Tony's voice dropped, strained. A warship built in another timeline. A ship of last resort. A ship meant to level continents. A ship that only activates when the operator decides the world is beyond saving. Janeway's eyes narrowed. And what does it do, specifically? Tony swallowed. Everything. It does everything. And none of it is good. The Sovereign's voice thundered across every open channel. Voyager. Tony, you cannot run. You cannot hide. I gave you a chance to join me peacefully. You refused. Now I will take what I require. Tony snapped. Try it. You want me? Then face me without the Death Star knockoff. The Sovereign floated closer, his crimson eyes fixed on Tony with unblinking certainty. Always defiant, always clinging to a broken philosophy. You believe in choice, in freedom, in the chaos of individual will. That is why realities collapse, Tony, because no one listens until it's too late. Tony fired back. Maybe if you stopped vaporizing planets, people would be more open to constructive feedback. The Sovereign answered calmly. I gave them unity. I gave them order. But they resisted. You would have resisted too if you had stayed in my world. So I crossed into new ones. Worlds untouched by you. Worlds that can be reforged. Janeway stepped forward. You will not harm this ship. You will not harm my crew. We've survived the Borg, the Kazan, spatial anomalies, hostile technology, natural disasters, and the death of entire star systems. We will survive you too. The Sovereign regarded her with cold curiosity. Brave words for someone outmatched, but irrelevant. He raised his hand. The enormous warship behind him began powering its main cannon. Tuvok reported, energy spike increasing. Exponential rise. Harry's voice cracked. Captain, that blast could obliterate us. Tony's breath caught. He's charging the Omega Lance. That thing can punch a hole through a moon. It will break your shields like tissue paper. Chakotay shouted. Options? Tuvok calculated in seconds. None that ensure survival. Janeway's jaw clenched. Tony? Tony hesitated for only a heartbeat. I can take it. If I overclock the suit. If I stay directly in the path. If I dump every ounce of Voyager's adaptive sensor feeds and warp harmonics into my repulsors, I can divert the lance long enough for you to move. Janeway shook her head. That will kill you. Tony laughed softly. Captain, every version of me has almost died at least once today. Why stop now? But Janeway stepped forward, eyes fierce. I will not sacrifice you, not after everything. We find another way. Tony looked at her, voice softer. Captain, listen to me. If he takes me, your ship dies anyway. Your crew dies anyway. The whole quadrant dies anyway. I am the target, not you. This is my fight, my mistake, my responsibility. Seven entered from the turbo lift, eyes blazing with urgency. The Sovereign is opening secondary energy conduits. His warship is preparing a multiversal sweep. It will target every space with quantum signatures, similar to Mr. Stark's armor. Tony inhaled sharply. Then they're targeting me no matter where I go. Seven nodded once. Yes. The Sovereign raised both arms, invoking the full might of the warship behind him. The cannon's red light grew blinding, evidence of a weapon designed to slay gods. Tony stepped forward, activating every system he had left, the armor humming like an overcharged heart. He spoke softly into the comm. Captain, it's been an honor. Janeway's voice cracked. Tony ignited his thrusters and flew straight toward the Sovereign. The cannon fired. A beam of raw annihilation, white and crimson, a river of collapsing physics, surged toward Tony with the fury of a dying universe. Tony met it head-on. His repulsors flared, absorbing the unimaginable power, turning the void into a storm of light. His armor groaned, his vision blurred. Every system failed one by one. Voyager shook from the backlash, the bridge lights flickering. Tom shouted, "He can't hold it!" Tuvok spoke with rare urgency. "Captain, if the Sovereign completes the sequence, the blast will outlast Mr. Stark's shield." Janeway gritted her teeth. "Then we stop him. Tuvok, target the warship's power relays. Paris, maneuver us into flanking position. B'Elanna, overload the lateral emitters." Voyager banked sharply and unleashed a barrage of golden phaser fire, striking the warship's outer hull. Explosions rippled across its armor, but the cannon did not stop. The Sovereign did not move. He watched Tony struggling, resisting, fighting. The Sovereign spoke calmly. "This is pointless. You cannot endure." Tony gritted his teeth. "Yeah, well, I've been told that before." The cannon intensified. Tony screamed. His armor began tearing apart. Seven's voice cut through the comm. "Captain, if we alter the deflector harmonics, we can create a micro-distortion around Mr. Stark to reduce the beam's impact." Janeway ordered, "Do it, now." Voyager's deflector lit blue and projected a shimmering distortion field around Tony. The beam's intensity dulled by the smallest degree, but Tony's strength was fading. The Sovereign raised his hand. The cannon's power doubled. Tony felt the world slip away. Janeway shouted, "He won't survive another burst!" Seven spoke urgently. "Captain, there is only one remaining solution." Janeway's eyes snapped to her. "Seven, what is it?" Seven met her gaze with resolve. "We open the rift, we draw the Sovereign inside, and we collapse it from the inside out," Chakotay whispered. "That would create a quantum implosion." Seven nodded. "Yes, and anything inside it will be annihilated." Janeway stared at Tony on the view screen, screaming beneath the cannon's wrath, and the Sovereign floating behind the blast, calm, inevitable. Her voice was barely audible. "Seven, do it." And Tony Stark felt the universe twisting behind him as the rift reopened, growing, waiting, hungry. The quiet in Voyager's sickbay was heavier than any silence Tony Stark had known. The hum of the ship's systems, the soft beeps from medical monitors, the faint hiss of a sterile air filter, all of it felt strangely louder because Tony himself was sitting still for once. The suit was gone, stripped down to bare components, scattered across engineering and auxiliary labs like pieces of a metallic skeleton. Tony sat on a biobed, wearing a simple Federation medical jumpsuit, staring down at the arc reactor glowing through the fabric. Blue light pulsed like a heartbeat he could feel deeper than blood. The doctor scanned him with professional annoyance. "Your body is showing elevated stress signatures, increased adrenaline markers, dehydration, and your cardiac rhythm is fluctuating because of that device in your chest. I recommend rest," Tony muttered. "I recommend pizza." The doctor raised an eyebrow. "I am not a chef, and that Talaxian monstrosity that Neelix calls food is hardly something I can prescribe." Tony smirked. "You and I are finally on the same page." Janeway stepped in, arms folded, voice steady. "You saved this ship, Mr. Stark. Again, I'd say that entitles you to more than dubious lasagna, but the doctor is right. You need rest." Tony stretched his neck, wincing slightly. Rest sounded good, but every time I close my eyes, I see him. Me. Whatever. Like a bad mirror stuck in my brain. Janeway studied him for a long moment. "It isn't easy fighting yourself. It changes you." Tony shrugged awkwardly. "Yeah, can confirm. Would not recommend. 0 out of 10. No stars." The doctor sighed, unimpressed. Sarcasm will not improve your recovery time. Tony smiled slightly. It improves my mood. That counts for something. Janeway sat beside him. The rift is unstable, but temporarily contained. B'Elanna and Seven believe they can stabilize it long enough to send you back. Tony's heart stopped for a moment. Back? Janeway nodded. To your universe. To your time. The words hit him like a physical force. He'd imagined it, feared it wouldn't happen, hoped it would, dreaded what might be waiting. Pepper, Happy, Rhodey, the Avengers, maybe all gone, maybe never happening, or maybe exactly as he left. Tony whispered, "So it's possible? Really?" Janeway smiled. "We've been trying since the moment you arrived. Believe me, Tony, getting you home was never a question, only a matter of engineering." Tony looked up, eyes glinting. "You know I love a good engineering miracle," Janeway replied softly. "I've noticed." Later, in engineering, the warp core bathed them all in a blue glow as Seven adjusted modulation frequencies across the deflector array. B'Elanna Torres wrestled with power regulators while cursing softly in Klingon. Harry worked calculations while glancing at Tony's old armor pieces sprawled across half the room. Tuvok supervised with logical detachment, though Tony caught him raising an eyebrow at Stark's improvised circuitry. Janeway arrived beside Tony. "This rift is unstable. It won't last long. You'll need your suit fully powered to survive the dimensional crossing. Are you certain you can handle the strain your reactor will be under?" Tony placed a hand over the arc reactor. "This thing has been trying to kill me for years. It won't start winning now." Seven approached, hands clasped behind her back. "We have integrated your previous modifications with Voyager systems. Your suit will use our warp-driven harmonics to stabilize your passage. It will not be comfortable." Tony smirked. "I've had worse. Once got drunk in a suit powered by 90% tequila. Long story. Terrible idea." Seven blinked. "I regret asking." Tony grinned as he stepped toward the newly assembled armor. It wasn't the one he arrived in. This suit was Voyager forged. Sleek silver plating with streaks of red and gold running like circuitry across the arms and chest. The arc reactor sat at its center, pulsing with steady energy. It hummed with warp-enhanced resonance. A Starfleet Stark hybrid. B'Elanna tapped a panel beside it. "We added micro-regulators and reactor dampeners. Don't blow up while you're wearing it. It'd look bad for my engineering record." Tony nodded with a smile. "I'll do my best not to ruin your resume." As the armor sealed around him, the helmet folded into place with a hiss of compressed air. A new HUD lit up with Voyager's algorithms. Stark's voice sounded stronger than it had since he arrived. "Let's take this baby home." On the bridge, the crew braced as power circuits rerouted to the main deflector. The rift outside pulsed like a wounded star, swirling reds, blues, and flickering energy echoing the distant future Tony's other self came from. Janeway stood tall, Chakotay at her side, Paris at the helm, Tuvok at tactical, Harry steadying the sequence, Seven maintaining synchronization, Neelix watching nervously. Even the doctor stood near the back, arms folded as if supervising the ship's health, along with Tony's. Janeway turned to him one last time through the comm. "Tony Stark, you've been an unexpected member of my crew, and we don't usually get to choose our family out here. Thank you for fighting for us," Tony responded, armor humming. "Thank you for letting me." Janeway smiled softly. "Godspeed, Tony," the deflector charged. The rift roared. Tony rocketed forward, a streak of warp-infused light, and as he hit the threshold, space folded around him. Time buckled. His reactor screamed with quantum fire. Every cell in his body felt stretched between infinity and oblivion. For a moment, he heard echoes of the Sovereign, threats, promises, a future not yet done. But something else echoed louder. Janeway, Pepper, Rhodey, Strange, Banner, Rogers, people he needed to go back to, people who weren't perfect, but who chose good despite it. Tony roared through the fracture in space. And then, light, earth air, the smell of asphalt after rain. Tony slammed into a sidewalk, suit sparking, then falling silent. He forced the helmet open, his lungs filled with air that felt like home. Cars passed. A woman screamed, someone shouted, then a familiar voice called out, full of desperate relief and anger. "Tony?" He turned. Pepper Potts stood there, eyes wide, tears welling, phone dropping to the ground, hands shaking, breath catching. Tony managed a crooked smile. "Hey, I think I got lost." She ran to him. He held on. Lights flashed as emergency vehicles approached. Sirens screamed. But Tony Stark didn't hear anything except her heartbeat against his chest. He was home. Voyager sailed onward, far beyond him, past stars that would never see Earth. The Delta Quadrant closed around it. The crew moved forward, their path uncertain but no longer alone in spirit. Somewhere in space, a Sovereign watched, waiting, a storm brewing across universes. But that was a story for another traveler. This one ended where it began, with Tony Stark choosing to live